Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back. I hope that your week is off to an incredible start. We are jamming today. We've got some war powers resolution flip-flopping going on, courtesy of the Democratic Party. We'll debrief exactly who is standing where and what the vote will look like this week. It apparently is coming up any day now, not official. Maybe Thursday is what we're talking about. In the House and the Senate, a couple of competing votes on what is happening in Iran. So we'll debrief all of that. And then we've also got some Supreme Court news because there was a banger today. We had a bunch of judges coming out defending the Second Amendment against the Pam Bondi DOJ. Very interesting development over here. We thought that they were very aggressively pro-Second Amendment. Turns out not in this case. And the Supreme Court really wasn't having it. We got a bunch of stuff queued up there from, who do we have? Gorsuch is here. We've got Alito and Amy Coney Barrett and even maybe a little Sotomayor because she was also skeptical about all of this. But of course, the big story on the day is Iran. And so we're going to talk about it and see exactly what's happening out there. First of all, confirming that we're coming across loud and clear all across the fruited plains of the internet. And it looks like we are. So let's get right to it. Democrats already flip-flopping on the War Powers Act. They're saying the president is operating on illegal war, which is very curious because every time a Democratic president engaged in foreign conflict, they salivated over it. They cheered it on. We've got Nancy Pelosi and others who are now saying we can't possibly be doing this. And so no matter where you stand on the issue, whether we think it's a good geostrategic decision or not, we're in it. And as usual, the Democratic Party will exploit it for their political ends. They will do anything the opposite of President Trump because they're spring-loaded to oppose him. So as we see, we know the New York Times and The Hill are trying to gauge when this vote is ultimately going to happen. But the War Powers Resolution, not that complicated, actually. And John Fetterman and others are saying that the Democratic Party is now missing the mark. Maybe so-called hypocrites will learn something if they actually read the act. But we'll go into the act today. I've got it all queued up, seen right here. It's not that complicated. We'll see exactly how it functions. But first, when is this vote going to happen? Congress facing a war powers vote, according to the New York Times, this week. We've got Democrats and a few Republicans now escalating their demands. They were screaming about this on Saturday, and they're trying to get it scheduled. We now have Bill Malugin, who is reporting on this, that it's likely going to be scheduled Thursday, saying Fox News has learned that Speaker Johnson just announced on the GOP conference call that the House will vote on DHS funding again this week, and then a vote on the War Powers Resolution likely on Thursday. And this is going to be an important moment because we're curious to see how the Democrats will fall on this. And other times we've had a vote, this has come back to bite the Democratic Party. They like to come out and say constantly that they're anti-war. Then they bring in Zelensky and unfurl a Ukrainian flag right across our Congress, all just salivating, dripping Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, knowing probably that Zelensky's going to maybe give him a little bit of the grift coming off of the American taxpayer teat. So this Thursday, we'll have a vote. We're for anchoring in all of our Congress on this issue so that we can have this for posterity's sake. But Bill says it's coming up soon. And The Hill has a little bit of a breakdown for us. They published this one out yesterday. Last night, they said, all right, lawmakers this week are going to be grappling with Trump's decision to launch some of these strikes. And they're writing here. Let me get rid of this annoying little pop-up thing. We got to nuke this little section over here. My apologies. Where is our nuker? There it is. Let's see if we can get rid of this. Bye. All right, now, the article. Lawmakers are grappling with President Trump's decision to launch strikes. The joint strikes with Israel killed the supreme leader. We're familiar. Khamenei is now dead. Republicans right now largely backing the president's decision, while Democrats are saying they should have gotten congressional approval. And is that what the law says? Is that what the War Powers Resolution says? Or can they just notify them, take action, and then come up and brief them in the aftermath? The argument will come to a head in both chambers this week. We've got Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie, so the same purveyors of the Epstein files, They're the ones who are going to bring this down, saying that any continuing military exercises must have congressional approval, and we'll see how the vote goes. Now, the House is only scheduled to hold votes Wednesday and Thursday this week. They canceled votes tomorrow and Friday. So Wednesday or Thursday in the House. Ro Khanna wants it to happen earlier. He said the American people are tired of regime change wars. They cost us billions of dollars and risk our lives, which is rich because the Democratic Party was saying we needed to spend billions of dollars to overthrow who? Putin, who was a dictator and a fascist and all the things. So it seems like they're in favor of their wars when Obama is dropping bombs, when Bill Clinton is dropping bombs, but when President Trump is operating according to a different worldview, they don't like that at all. So Ro Khanna, we got it. Tim Kaine, I've got him queued up. He's saying that they want to block the use of force and saying this is an illegal war. And like everything, they're going to try to find an avenue by which they can impeach the president, whether it's via the Epstein files or whether it's this war or anything else. Okay, they made it up last time, by the way. They said there was a Russia collusion phone call that was problematic. And then Trump tried to insurrect the nation on January 6th. All made up, all nonsense, as we know. But now the Trump administration is going to be briefing House lawmakers tomorrow on this. Senators will also get briefed on Tuesday. We've got a bunch of action in Congress today. War powers resolutions are privileged procedures, so members can bypass the leaders and just bring this stuff right to the floor. Unclear how this is all going to fare. We say that apparently last week it appeared like their measure would be unlikely to pass because Republicans are aggressively oppositional to them. At least two Democrats as well, Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey and Jared Moskowitz, both of whom are close allies of Israel. So a lot of Democrats are very close with Israel, so it's unlikely that they'll oppose this, had initially expressed their opposition to the resolution, but it's unclear where they stand. And are they going to circle the wagons and stand with the Democratic Party, or are they going to break away and, in this case, stand with Israel and the United States in this operation? It's a joint operation between the two of us, but some of them have, as this article says, close allies of Israel. Okay. So still Massey said he wanted to put lawmakers on the record about the war. Massey said, this is not America first. I've got that open. Josh Gottheimer, another Democrat, is in on this. Warren Davidson, Republican from Ohio, expressed support for the war powers resolution, saying this needs congressional approval. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of debate about this. Now, I've got the actual resolution pulled up. Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, is opposed to this war. And he said, I swear an oath to the Constitution. We've got Murkowski's queued up. We've got Susan Collins from Maine who's queued up. We've got Murkowski says, I expect Congress to receive a briefing and then she'll understand the scope. So there's going to be a group of people who just say, I need to wait until we can learn more. And then we'll make our decision. Susan Collins was also on X. She's a Republican. She said sustained operation. So sustained, depends how long this goes. What does sustained mean? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Fetterman is a hard no on the war powers resolution. So another Democrat joining in on the Republican side. And we've also got the Homeland Security shutdown. We got a bunch of stuff that is all going on. And part of the argument is maybe you can tie some of that to the war powers resolution. Say, well, if you want to vote on this, then you have to open the government or something. So the House Committee on Agriculture is also going to hold a meeting. We've got a lot of stuff happening this week, and it's going to be very curious what happens starting tomorrow once they get the briefings from the military and the Department of War. But Elizabeth Warren is out. She says, Trump's war against Iran is illegal and a betrayal of the American people. Congress cannot allow Trump to drag yet another generation into a forever war. We don't need to listen to her because you know what she sounds like, but that's what she's posting. And Fetterman is coming out in opposition to all of them, essentially. And here is the clip and the exchange of Fetterman over on CNN. So it's kind of shaking some people loose and forcing them to memorialize their position. Here's John Fetterman explaining.
The War Powers Act, you know, what's required of the president is to provide 48 hours of notification, and then he or she have 60 days, up to 90 days to withdraw those troops, you know, before Congress approves that.
Right.
Neither of those have been activated. He did provide that to the Gang of Eight. and there are no American troops on the ground now. This was an incredibly precise and successful strikes, and they eliminated most of the leadership. So here we are. So yes, I do support that. You know, why can't the entire world celebrate that he's dead for what he's done to the world? Have people ever?
Well, I guess got to ask the Democratic Party about some of this. The big leader of the Democratic Party, even though she's not officially in the leadership role anymore, is Nancy Pelosi. She's also out opposing this, and it's getting a lot of attention because of another clip that we see circulating, but seems like she's a little bit hypocritical on this one. She wrote, President Trump's decision to initiate military hostilities into Iran starts another unnecessary war which endangers our service members and destabilizes an already fragile region. She says the Constitution, which I don't think she's ever read, is clear. Decisions that lead our nation into war must be authorized by Congress. And it's curious because Lance Gooden, who is a Republican who is from Texas, he said this is curious because when Barack Obama was dropping bombs left and right across the Middle East, Nancy Pelosi came out and said, we don't need any approval at all. We're not even concerned about whether or not Barry Obama came over to Congress. She said, this is for every Democrat criticizing President Trump, he said, for eliminating the leader of the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. And of course, the Democrats all will just flip-flop on this immediately. Here was Nancy Pelosi back when Obama was in charge and what she said back then.
So, Madam Speaker, Madam Leader, you're saying that the president did not need authorization initially and still does not need any authorization from Congress on Libya?
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all very much.
Don't need permission from Congress, doesn't need to update you at all. Whatever Obama's doing in Libya is perfectly appropriate and no one cares. That's from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. At this time, she was the minority leader. But that's where they stand. Then when Trump does it, just like anything else, okay, most of America wants the border closed. Trump closes the border, they screech and shout and have insurrections across all the sanctuary cities. They're just spring-loaded. No matter what Trump and this administration does, they're going to come out in opposition to it. So absolutely hypocritical, as you can see, and you're going to see a lot more of this, no doubt about it. But here is the War Powers Resolution ensconced in U.S. code. And it's pretty clear, pretty cut and dry. We're going to run through some additional clips here and actually take a look at the War Powers Resolution, which is now submitted in Congress, which is very likely coming up for a vote this week, any minute now, at least in the Senate. This one came in from Tim Kaine, Insane in the Membrane, and Rand Paul. So it's bipartisan. Now it's being introduced, referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations, and there'll be a vote on this later this week. But the War Powers Resolution is pretty clear. It says, this is the purpose and the policy of the War Powers Act. Congress can scream and shout that they have the right to declare war. No one's arguing with them about that. But Congress also passed this, 50 U.S. Code Section 1541, talking about the purpose of this and what its goal is. As we talk a lot about here, Congress is weak and feckless. They can't really do anything. It's embarrassing how emasculated that entire body has become. We want 3 strong branches of government with checks and balances so that we have the division of the elite ruling class across multiple entities, not consolidated into one. But they don't want to act on strikes, military strikes, but they definitely want to support their lobbyists who are representative of the defense contracting industry. So make sure they get paid for all these foreign entanglements without Congress having to declare war. They have to vote for war. Oh man, that's not going to be good for them. That's a really hard decision. Many people are grappling with that today and this week. So they want to avoid that. They want to spread this out, hand it off to the executive branch so that they can make the decision and they can be the one to blame for all of the fallout. So here's the purpose. It's the purpose of this chapter to fulfill the intent of the framers of the Constitution to ensure the collective judgment of both Congress and the president will apply when the United States is introduced into hostilities. And we're going to come back to this because the Obama administration already fleshed out what this word means and gave us a definition for it. Or into situations involving imminent hostilities and more. They explain very clearly, under Article 1, Section 8, Congress has the power to make out the certain provisions of the Constitution. This is the necessary and proper clause. We got that. And the president also has some roles as the commander-in-chief, but they can be exercised pursuant to a declaration of war, specific statutory authorization, or a national emergency created by an attack, its territories, or its armed forces. And combining the two, this is the purpose and the policy. Now we get into the actual mechanics of how this works. And what we'll see is about consultation. The president, in every possible instance, shall consult with Congress before introducing the United States into hostilities. Trump did communicate with Congress. We just heard John Fetterman explain it. Imminent involvement, and after that introduction, shall consult with Congress regularly until no more further conflict is necessary. That's the consultation requirement in 52 U.S. Code. Also reporting. Now, in the absence of a declaration of war, which is where we're at right now, in any case in which the United States and our armed forces are introduced into hostilities or into situations that involve imminent hostilities, into a territory or more, we fast forward, the president shall submit within 48 hours to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem of the Senate a report in writing setting forth the following things. So the president just has to abide by this rule, deliver a report, and then Congress can take it and run. The circumstances necessitating the introduction of the armed forces to explain why we need it, the constitutional and legislative authority under which this introduction took place, and the estimated scope and duration of the hostilities. Now, once the president does that, he makes a reporting requirement occur. Then, not later than 48 hours after the incident, next section over, 1543A, whether in an offensive or defensive capacity, okay, so you can use hostilities offensively, the president shall transmit, that's a requirement, to the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate and the House a report on the incident, which, of course, has been done. All of this, I'm sure, is being complied with. We have not read it yet. Looks like Congress will be reviewing this tomorrow. And it continues. Then Congress can take action. Each report submitted shall be transmitted to the Speaker of the House and to the Senate, and they, if they deem it advisable, shall jointly request the president convene Congress in order to take appropriate action. And then within 60 calendar days after the report is submitted, whichever's earlier, the president shall terminate the use of the armed forces. Okay, so Congress can come in and approve it or decline it. Trump has already said we want 30 days, probably give or take. He said they're actually ahead of schedule this morning. They've already wiped out most of the leadership. Otherwise, it's coming to a close. And Congress can, of course, extend it. Congress can come out, declare war. They can extend it with an authorization of use of military force and make some changes. But they don't have to do that, right? They can decide we're not going to do that and end it sooner rather than later. But the point is the president is following the law right now. And again, you may disagree with the decision to strike Iran. Many people do. But the question is about the standard. And of course, the Democratic Party has no standards. And so they will not measure Trump against the law or against prior precedent. They'll just measure him against their strong desire to get him out of power so that they can bring their war people in and then go, I guess, send more money to Zelensky. So all that, of course, is ensconced in law. And the Democrats are now moving forward with their war powers resolution. It's been introduced by Tim Kaine, Insane in the Tim Kaine. And this was actually introduced back in January 29th, 2026, so that they could get a jump on this thing. And it's been read twice and referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations. Here are the people who are on board with this. Rand Paul looks like he's the only Republican thus far. The rest are Democrats. Bernie Sanders is on here. Peter Welch from Vermont. Brian Schatz from Hawaii. Chris Van Hollen is probably down in El Salvador. Andy Kim. Adam Pencilneck Schiff is on here. Charles Schumer and Alex Padilla, Christopher Murphy, Tammy Duckworth, and Ruben Gallego from Arizona. So all of them are on it. And I'd be very curious to see if, how these people were coming down on the Ukraine conflict. So some conflicts that Joe Biden is indulging in are better than conflicts that President Trump is indulging in. And of course, I'm sure a lot of this will get fleshed out. And we want to see them on the record too, and they can decide what to do when the vote comes forward. But here's the joint resolution, and there's not much to it. He's saying that pursuant to the law, very short resolution, let's back up here. Congress has the sole power to declare war. The president has a constitutional responsibility to defend the United States. Congress has not declared war on Iran. The use of military force against Iran would introduce us into hostilities within the meaning of the War Powers Resolution. And so under various sections, we can remove the United States from the conflict. Congress hereby directs, okay, if this gets passed later this week, directs the president to remove the United States from hostilities within and against Iran unless explicitly authorized by the Congress. And of course, if we're in a war right now and they say you're cut off immediately, what does that do to the engagement that's currently in process and already underway? Does that leave American troops out to hang out to dry? Probably, but we'll see how they rectify and reconcile that as the vote comes upon us. So Tim Kaine is already confirming this, that this was kind of an effort that was in response to the Venezuela situation, saying last June, the Senate voted on a similar war powers resolution. They introduced this last June to prevent stuff against Iran. The June resolution back then gained bipartisan support, but did not receive enough votes in advance. In January, Kaine forced a vote on his bipartisan war powers resolution on Venezuela. There was enough Republican support there to advance, but then the leadership didn't bring it forward. It was sidestepped by the Republicans. So again, maybe there are some procedural maneuvers that happen that don't lead this to come down for a vote. But Tim Kaine has tried it a couple times and has failed, it looks like, every time. And I think there's one thing that is very common amongst both sides of the aisle is war. They can usually all get on board with that no matter what it is. We'll see if that happens coming up this week. But Tim Kaine was out. Here's a little snippet of him. He showed up on Fox News Sunday, which is a curious venue for him. And here's what he said when he was talking to Fox.
Moment, do you think the president is in compliance with the law?
Absolutely. He is not. This is an illegal war, Shannon, because the representative cited a statute, but he neglected to mention the Constitution. And the Constitution can't be changed by statute. The Constitution says no declaration of war without Congress. The president has called this war against Iran. The president can act to imminently defend the United States against imminent attack if that happens.
So that's curious because there is an argument that the War Powers Act, the War Powers Resolution itself is entirely unconstitutional. It's gone up to the Supreme Court and back down and up and down. And it's currently in place. It's currently law. But Congress can remove it. Okay. They are the ones who passed that statute and that resolution. So if they don't like it, if they think that this president is abusing it or it's been exploited by Obama or by Bill Clinton or by any other president, then they can just change it. But they don't really want to do that because they want the War Powers Resolution to exist because it basically alleviates them of having to make any of these decisions. Instead, they can just delegate it off to the president. The president can do it. And then all Congress does is just turns around and complains about it constantly and just says, how could you do something like this? Well, we were basically at war, and still are in many ways, with Russia. And Joe Biden and the Democrats were pumping money over to Zelensky for years, telling us that Putin needed to go. There were all sorts of people talking about taking him out and wanting a regime change over there. They couldn't effectuate it. Now we have a new military leadership that's currently in place, and they were able to move very rapidly and eliminate the Iranians quickly. But that's an argument that the War Powers Resolution is unconstitutional. If it is, then you guys should just undo it. Stop having unconstitutional laws on the books because it seems like, as we just read, it does give the president an opportunity to make a use and make a judgment call about what hostilities are. And Obama also used that, okay? And they were not screaming and shouting about this. This is an article from Obama's 2011 intervention in Libya. And there was a lot of reaction to Obama dropping bombs over there. And here was some of the conversation that was happening here in Congress back then. So they did introduce an act here. On June 3rd, 2011, the House of Representatives passed a resolution calling for the withdrawal of the military from the air and naval operations around Libya. Obama was the president back then. They said, Obama, within 14 days, we want an explanation of why Barry did not come to Congress for permission to continue to take part in the mission that went on for a while. On June 13th, then, the House passed a resolution They prohibited the use of funds for operations in the conflict. 110 Democrats and 138 Republicans voted in favor of that. So Obama got cut off back in 2011. Then Harold Koh, he came over from the State Department. He was the legal advisor. They brought him in front of the Senate. They said, Harold, how could you? How could you bomb Libya? Koh from the Obama administration was questioned by the committee. The Obama administration, they said, hey, what do you guys think hostilities are? Okay, this is kind of the argument. War Powers Act references hostilities. Hostilities is different than war. So if you use those interchangeably, are you saying war? Are you saying hostilities? The War Powers Resolution says hostilities are appropriate to act upon. But war is a power of Congress. So how did Obama define it? And did they say that he was illegal and that he should be impeached? Koh was questioned by the committee on this interpretation of hostilities. What does that mean? War Powers Resolution, Section 4A1 and 5B all reference it. Obama's person, he said, well, under the Constitution, the term hostilities was left up for interpretation by the executive branch. Oh, so Obama's people set the standard, and therefore the interpretation fit the historical definition of that word. He said that historically the term hostilities had previously been used to mean limited military action, acting in support of a conflict, and the scope of this operation suits that interpretation. Now, ultimately, the committee still remained concerned by the actions of Obama, but Obama did it. Nobody even really cared about it afterward. On June 24th, the House rejected Joint Resolution 68, which would have provided him to continue operations up to 1 year. And so there's a battle, right? There's a natural tension here. And it's all normal, and I think good, because war is a very, very serious thing. We do not want more dead Americans. We've lost 4 already in this conflict. They're now dead. May they rest in peace. And so it needs to be dealt with extreme, I would say, support from both sides. And we'll see if that ultimately happens in Congress. We know that there are polls out that say the American people are not in on it, but who knows what those polls actually are reflective of and how they're being created. But the point is, there's a standard that exists in America. Whether you like the foreign engagements or not, presidents have been doing them for decades. Decades. And maybe we should remove the War Powers Act and say the president can't do any of that anymore, unless Congress does actually make a decision and put their money where their mouth is, instead of just kind of whine and moan and defer it all over to the president. Under Joe Biden, they didn't care. He didn't even know what was going on. But President Trump obviously is a different component. So that is underway. It's processing currently. Massey is opposed to the war. He said, this is not America first. When Congress reconvenes, I'm going to work with Ro Khanna. The Constitution requires a vote, and your representative needs to be on record as opposing or supporting this war. And I think this is actually a good thing to see happen, because the Democrats, they always want it both ways. They are the biggest flip-floppers in the world. John Kerry said, I actually voted for the $87 billion before I voted against it. We all remember that. He was in favor of, continuing Iraq and Afghanistan, and then he wasn't. Then Hillary came out. She voted for it, we remember. And then all of a sudden, hindsight's like, oh, I regret it. And that took her out of the primary, right? She's probably never president because of that vote, thankfully. Instead, we got Obama, who was on the opposite end of that. So put your money where your mouth is, mark it down so that we can all know where you stand, and then we'll take it from there. But Massey is going to be bringing the vote to our attention. And Greta Van Susteren had this great response to Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar, another senator from Minnesota, who may have learned how to read at a Leering Center. But she posted this, and Greta responded. She said, the president, with no authorization from Congress, which again is a false premise, Obama didn't get permission, Clinton didn't get permission, has gone to war with Iran. Under the Constitution, it's Congress and not the president who has the power to declare war. We got it. I've long supported sanctions against Iran, which is a terrorist state. So again, like this type of hypocrisy, I think is going to be very good to flesh out. So are you going to vote to support this or not? I've long supported sanctions against Iran, which is a terrorist state. Okay, so are you saying the president was justified? If they're terrorizing the country and the planet and by proxy our country, Americans, then do you support this or not? I also supported the Iran nuclear agreement negotiated by Obama and our allies, where they dropped billions of dollars in pallets of cash. I oppose, though, Trump's decision to take us out of that, saying Iran should never have a nuclear weapon and the regime's aggression in the region and repression of Iranian citizens must end. Okay, well, that's what the president is saying. And that's why the president is going in there. Again, whether you agree with him or not. That's the justification. But this military campaign, like, they're so wishy-washy. They want it both ways. They want to say that they're anti-war and they have no interest in anything the president is doing, but at the same time, basically agreeing with the underlying premise here. The military campaign, however, puts American troops at serious risk. True. And has begun without a clear justification of any imminent need for war. Such consequential decision requires debate and authorization from Congress. So this war has not been justified to the American people, or maybe to them. But she says, Greta, in response, Senator, I'm surprised at you. You know about the War Powers Act. You are a lawyer and smart. Pfft. She's from Ilhan's state, where they've allowed themselves to get defrauded, and all of us defrauded, to the tune of billions of dollars by foreign Somalis who all build clearing centers. So I don't know how smart they are. It is one thing to disagree, but you know the president does not have to get pre-authorization from Congress. They must notify you 48 hours after that. You guys wrote the law. You guys passed the War Powers Resolution bills. So you know how it works, but now again, they're just pretty shameless liars. So rather than standing by the president, who is working to accomplish a lot of the same things that she says, I want sanctions. I don't like the terrorist state. I don't want them to have nuclear weapons. They are aggressive in the region. They're repressing Iranian citizens. But I still don't like the president. And so I'm going to make up a false premise about the presidential powers under our law, which he clearly has. So it's very dishonest. And it's really shameful to try to exploit this and try to, finagle your way through this by lying, essentially, to your constituency. But we know that Tom Cotton is in favor of this, and he explained accordingly that he'll be supporting it. He'll be voting for it. And he appreciates other Democrats like Fetterman and Gottheimer and Landsman and others supporting our troops. Here's Tom Cotton on this conflict.
Again, I'm sure that he's going to be speaking more in coming days. The administration will be briefing Congress, and we're going to have a vote in the Congress. The Democrats are forcing a vote. I expect there'll be overwhelming Republican support for our troops, for our troops, and for the president's decision to finally eliminate the threat of Iran. And I would invite Democrats in the Congress to join their Democratic colleagues like John Fetterman and Josh Gottheimer and Greg Landsman in supporting our troops in finally putting America's foot down against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
All right, so that's Cotton. Got some more people queued up here. This is from Josh Gottheimer, and he is a Democrat from New Jersey. And he said, I agree with Mike Lawler, another Republican from New York. And they said, so long as death to America remains the rallying cry, Iran is going to remain a persistent threat. We know Tehran is still pursuing a nuclear weapon, and that goalpost has changed so aggressively. I thought we obliterated them. And then pursuing a nuclear weapon, it's like, well, I think they've been doing that for like 40 years now. And every time we hear from somebody, it's like, any day now, it's going to happen, any day now. Well, you said that like 20 years ago. Okay, so since the June conflict has moved aggressively to rebuild its ballistic missiles capabilities, a direct threat to our brave service members and democratic allies, Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And we've been talking about this on the members only stream, but it seems like a lot of the opposition to Iran would be galvanized by the fact that Iran is popping off and blowing up, Dubai and striking international airports in closely situated countries. So this is why we oppose the War Powers Resolution. Congress should be briefed on any planned military action, and then we'll have a vote. So we've got a little bipartisan unanimity here. Not all Democrats are just immediately anti-Trump. Now, Mark Kelly, of course, is going to be a big vote. He's the space cadet senator from Arizona. And here's what he said about this. He's not a hard no. He's military. And he says this.
If there is a war powers vote, Senator, will you be a yes?
Well, I'm going to have to take a close look at it. I want to hear from the White House what their strategy is going forward. I would say at this point it's rather unlikely that I would be. They went into this without any discussion with us ahead of time.
If there is a war.
Yeah, so He's a little bit less on the Amy Klobuchar, Nancy Pelosi, this is an illegal war thing, because I think he knows better. And he wants to be coy about it. So rather than let him be an anti-Trump, anti-war, liar, put your money where your mouth is, mark it down, and go vote. And hopefully those votes are coming soon. Now, here's more. Another senator, Dave McCormick, slams Democrats for hypocrisy, which is something that's easy to do here based on the fact that they are flip-flopping at every turn.
Well, first of all, the president acted completely within his constitutional authority. For 50 years, Democratic presidents and Republican presidents have been making this claim. When President Obama took a military action in Libya, the very same argument was made by President Obama. And by the way, some of those same Democrats that are now saying President Trump is acting out of line were supportive of the Libya operation. So this is completely within his constitutional authority. He briefed the Congress as is required by the War Powers Resolution. He has 60 days, even under that resolution, before any further requirements come into effect. And what we need to focus on now is continuing to support these great young Americans that are carrying out this extraordinary mission. It's early days, but we're a little more than 24 hours in. And I was reflecting on 35 years ago when I was going into Iraq. The military has been magnificent. The coordination between the United States and Israel, 2,000 missions over the last 24 hours, the intel that allowed us to take out the top tier of leadership, the extraordinary coordination and effectiveness. It's something to behold, but we've got a lot of work to do. There's still more work to be done.
Yeah, and the hypocrisy will continue from the Democratic Party. They don't want to talk about, their candidates, their presidents, who are the ones launching wars and strikes constantly. They'd rather just blame the president for acting unconstitutionally and illegally and like a fascist and all the things, even though he's following the same pattern and practice that basically every other president our entire lives has followed. So we now know that Ilhan Omar and Nancy Mace are definitely not friendly. Nancy Mace, after the strikes occurred, said, "My heart goes out to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib tonight," after Khomeini was killed, sending them thoughts and prayers. Breaking: Iran Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei confirmed dead. So Nancy Mace says, "Oh, Ilhan, Rashida." The two screechers at the State of the Union, constantly looking like idiots. So then Ilhan responded. She said, "All right, Nancy, I hope you aren't drunk and took your staff's advice. Rashida and I don't know this man and feel confident he didn't care about us. Please restrain from drinking too much, as you have been warned from your staff, and stay off social media when you are drunk. I pray in his holy month you find peace and respect for yourself, comma." That's from Ilhan. And so Nancy Mace responded to that, and she said, "Honey, it's called please refrain, all right? Not please restrain." This is what happens when your staff is from the third world and can't speak the proper English. Or maybe they all got educated at a Leering Center up there in Minnesota. It's called please refrain, not please restrain yourself, Ilhan. And so that just is going to continue on. And it's like, that really is like maybe World War IV. So that's going on. Now we're asking ourselves, what is the basis for America's interest in Iran? Are they really going to develop a nuclear weapon and obliterate all of us? I doubt it. But here's what Catherine Herridge is saying: why Iran's ballistic missile force remains the greatest threat. And they're doing some funky stuff with this, saying she got these military memos over from Catherine Herridge Reports, in case you missed it, said these military testing memos are strong evidence Iran experimented with and deployed contaminated or dirty warheads against the U.S. forces as early as January 2020. And we are so in the fog of war on these things. I think, when it comes to the president, we are not a fan of war, obviously. Our whole lives have been sort of birthed out of war. We're like Bane and Batman. War, we were born into it. We were molded by it. I was in high school when 9/11 happened. And after that, it was like constant. War, 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 and even before that. So it's like a never ending thing for us. So we're a little bit skeptical about it. They also said, we had mission accomplished back during Iraq. George Bush came out with Karl Rove. We did it. And then we fast forward, thousands of Americans are dead, billions, trillions of dollars that could have been invested here, gone. And for what? Nothing that we can see actually gave us an actual benefit. We could have taken those trillions of dollars, something we've long talked about here, and built, for example, nuclear power plants. We'd all be sitting on free money with LED lights spinning around our brains or whatever. It'd be basically free because we'd have a couple hundred nuclear power plants built across America, giant grand infrastructure that could have got us a lot more mileage than $1 trillion spent in Afghanistan or whatever the numbers were. But we also can't see. We can't see inside behind the curtain. It's one of the reasons why these are such complicated issues to unpack. We know that back during COVID, we could watch the people on the screens lie through their teeth to us, and then we could go out and validate what they were saying, whether it was true or not. And one of the stories that I tell is when COVID just was happening and the jabs just came out, I had lunch with a friend of mine. She's a lawyer. She's married. We had lunch. She explained to me that her and her husband ran out and got the jabs instantly. I was like, you guys are crazy, but they went and did it. Like the first day, she's like, we got in line. We did the whole thing. We got them. Then she explained like 2 weeks later or like a week later, they both got COVID, both of them, like boom, boom. And I went, that's very curious. And after that lunch, I left the building. I went to back to my office, essentially, where I was watching COVID 24/7. They're telling me on the screen, 99% effectiveness, 100%, doesn't transmit anything. Okay, go get it, go get it. And I'm sitting here going, wait, I can validate that. They're lying through their teeth to me. I know that because I just talked to two people, not one, two, who both got it right after they took the jabs. And so I was able to compare and contrast and reconcile the truth. I knew that everybody on the screen was a big fat liar. Turns out we're right. And I was able to piece this together. Okay, we all went through this. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You probably have your own version of this in some way, shape, or form. But in this situation, we just can't see it. We don't know. Are the Iranian people standing up over there in Iran and taking their country back, or are they consolidating and organizing against death to America? We just don't know. And so we have to defer to our elected officials. This is part of the reason we have a democratic republic. We elect people. We pass our judgment off to them. We say, hey, we trust you to make these decisions. And in this case, that's President Trump. It's not Joe Biden. It's not George Bush. It's not Bill Clinton. It's President Trump. And so there's a lot that we can't see that they are seeing. And we don't know ultimately what the final factor was, whether it was legitimate influence, whether it was legitimate national concern, if it's other undue pressure from foreign countries or whatever. We just can't see it. But these are the things that we can see that I'm sure are a part of the equation at some point. And you might say, well, a lot of this was used to justify Iraq or Afghanistan. Maybe so. But here's what Catherine is ultimately reporting. Enough of that little tangent. These military testing memos are strong evidence that they were creating dirty warheads. We got memos as part of a recent investigation into the toxic fallout of Iran's ballistic missiles in 2020 on U.S. forces at the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. You see, 3 independent environmental experts who reviewed the military records told us these chemicals were in there. Actinium-228, doesn't sound good. Bismuth and cesium, which I'm pretty sure that's a bad one. They seemed out of place and they were in these warheads. All right. So they're like seeding ballistic missiles with these materials. You see a memo for record. This is a subject, exposure to hazardous and toxic materials, April 28, 2021, to identify and record exposure to hazardous and toxic material. Here's what we found. Lots of stuff. Pyrene, mercury, chromium, benzoyl, phenol, whatever. All U.S. military assigned and attached to this entity who served in this area for more than 2 weeks are directed to annotate this exposure on their DD form. Post-deployment health assessment. Additionally, members, American military members who experience symptoms like shortness of breath, rashes, unintentional weight loss, fatigue, memory concerns, should consult with their flight surgeon and aeromedical physician, specifically and mention exposure to elevated levels of particulate matter noted during their deployment. And the point of contact for that is here. Here's more on this. And I can't speak intelligently about what normal levels are, or whether you'll find this in all ballistic missiles, or whether they're trying to seed stuff, like they don't have nuclear materials because we just blew that out, or they're trying other attack vectors. We also saw reporting that there were apparently hypersonic missiles that the Chinese were going to give over to them that they could then use to take out aircraft carriers in the Gulf. And that is obviously not a good situation. So maybe it's a preemptive maneuver to prevent that capability from coming in that would absolutely foreclose any military action lest they take out your aircraft carriers. So interesting developments that are happening. And again, we can't see anything. So a lot of it is just turning it over to your guy to make a judgment call and make a decision. Of course, that is what happened. Here we had Representative Luna over in the chair of MS Now. And here is what she had to say about all of this. Is it an imminent threat? Here's Luna.
Congresswoman, can I ask you, what is the legal basis that you understand this president has to launch this war?
Well, his Article 2 authorities actually give him the powers to protect our troops, our citizens, if imminent threat is basically we are facing it as a country. What I will also state, though, is that the Iranian regime did make an assassination attempt on the president. The CIA director actually came out, I think it was either today or yesterday, and actually talked about that. And the president was still willing to negotiate with them in terms of ending their nuclear enrichment program. And so just imagine what would have happened if they were successful in assassinating our president. And I'm sure your network and you're not advocating for that.
So, Congresswoman, are you saying that it went into the decision to invade Iran, to attack Iran, to decapitate their leadership, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump? So this was personal and about him.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
No, that is not what I'm saying, but I am answering the question that he posed as what authorities is he given? That's the Article 2 authority if there's direct threat against our service members or our citizens, which, as I outlined earlier, the southern portion of Iran in that belt region actually had imminent threat with their short-range missiles to our base, in addition to their nuclear enrichment program, of which they were not negotiating in good faith, so it's multifaceted. And as you are seeing now, they have fired back. They struck. We now lost 3 military service members. There are multiple wounded. And again, it is not the intention of the U.S. government to invade. That is not what is happening. These are isolated, strategic, large-scale attacks. But again, there are negotiations that will take place, or at least open communication with the White House as soon as the president decides that he is willing or ready to talk. And that has developed in the last couple of hours. So that update will come hopefully later on this evening.
And they'll get briefed on it, and hopefully they can share some of that briefing with us so we can understand what Congress is being told about the basis for these strikes in Iran. And as we mentioned earlier, there are apparently countries now consolidating, and this seems like it is appropriate, and we would very much welcome this so that the region can govern itself, so that America doesn't need to go govern all of the world. So, all right, we come in. Only America has overwhelming force to make and deliver a strike like this to decapitate the Iranian regime. But after that, we're kind of done, right? I mean, there's a bunch of other countries over there. A lot of them are very rich. A lot of them have a lot of power, and they can help out, right? They can govern themselves and take care of their own domain. Maybe that's happening. Here, Office of the Spokesperson for Immediate Release shared this one. This is coming from Brett McGurk. Former White House coordinator, served 4 presidents, and he's sharing this post, which I did see validated from our government, said March 1st, joint statement on Iran's missile and drone attacks in the region. And people might say, well, Iran's, so what? They can't do anything. They're bombing airports and stuff, like civilian locations. I understand the United States has military bases in the region, but they're not targeting those. They're targeting the Burj Dubai, various buildings over there. The text of the following statement was released by the governments of the United States of America and Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE, all about these missile strikes, saying the United States and all of the countries strongly condemn Iran and their indiscriminate and reckless missile and drone attacks against sovereign territories across the region. Bahrain, Iraq, the Kurdistan region, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE, all getting attacked. These unjustified strikes targeted sovereign territory, endangered civilian populations, and damaged civilian infrastructure. The Islamic Republic's actions represent a dangerous escalation that violates the sovereignty of multiple states and threatens regional stability. The targeting of civilians and of countries not engaged in hostilities is reckless and a destabilizing behavior. So we stand united in defense of our citizens' sovereignty and more, and remain committed to regional security and commend the effective air and missile defense cooperation that has prevented far greater loss of life and destruction. It's great. So there's a lot of people, a lot of military, and they can help with a handoff. Here you guys go. We did the hard work, the heavy lifting. You can take it from here, right? So that's a statement. We also see that this is a post from Caroline Leavitt, and Caroline is responding to Matt Walsh. And we have a lot of empathy for Matt Walsh here because we're about the same age, I think. We grew up living through Iraq and Afghanistan and being lectured to, oh, there's weapons of mass destruction. We're going to die any minute. And like, where were they? Oh, no. Oh, we're going to die any minute? No, not really. Turns out it's a regime change war. We lost thousands of Americans. We spent trillions of dollars, and we still have no idea what we got for it. So far, Matt Walsh said, we've heard that although we killed the whole Iranian regime, this was not a regime change war. And although we obliterated their nuclear program, we had to do this because of their nuclear program. Right. And although Iran was not planning any attacks on the U.S., they might have been, depending on who you ask. And although we are not fighting this war to free the Iranian people, they are now free or might be, depending on who seizes power. And we have no idea who that will be. The messaging on this is a little bit confusing. We understand that. So Caroline came out and she said, let me help you out for all of us who have questions. On Saturday, Trump released a statement laying out clear objectives. Caroline says, let me repeat them. 1, we're going to destroy the Iranian regime's missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. Annihilate the Navy. Ensure their terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or attack our forces. Stop them from making and using IEDs or roadside bombs, which have gravely wounded and killed thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. Guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Prevent this regime and its terrorist leaders from threatening America and our core national security interest is a clear-eyed and necessary objective. Killing terrorists is good for America. 49 of the most senior Iranian regime leaders, including Khamenei, have already been wiped off the face of the earth, and so far, that's good. Finally, while Operation Midnight Hammer did obliterate their major sites, the regime was fully committed to rebuilding, and they refused to make a deal, despite months of extensive talks and good faith efforts by President Trump's top negotiators. Simply put, the terrorist Iranian regime would not say yes to peace. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has actively and intentionally facilitated the killing of Americans while chanting death to America and funding other bloodthirsty terrorists seeking to destroy the United States and Western civilization. Prior American leaders were too weak and cowardly to do anything. Now Trump is doing it, correcting decades of cowardice and holding those responsible for the deaths of Americans. Their brutal attacks and threats will finally end. Under Trump, America will win and the terrorists will be defeated. From Caroline Leavitt. And I still don't know that we have a bunch of new information in there, but that's the justification for the strikes, courtesy of the White House. And Tim Burchett says, no matter where you stand on this, at least this is being executed by actual military men and women, strong military men and women, not men pretending to be women and wearing dresses. Here is Tim Burchett.
Hey, everybody, Tim Burchett. A lot of talk over what's going on in Iran. The main talk at first was whether President Trump had the ability or approval to do that. Of course, if he went to Congress, they would leak it. Those people, a lot of members of Congress, a lot of Democrats hate. It's hard to decide who they hate more. Is it Trump or is our country?
That is a tough question, yeah.
If you remember, Obama gave them pallets of cash, and as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the debate is whether they allowed them to get in the nuclear business through contributions to the Clinton Foundation. I guess you can debate that all you want, but there's only one reason that Iran would want to get into the nuclear business, and that is for missiles and bombs. They've got the cheapest oil in the world. It's right under their feet. And of course, Bill Clinton bombed an aspirin factory to get his name off the front page with Monica Lewinsky. And of course, the Chinese are upset because they've been getting that oil and they've been funding Iran's war, or terror wars, terrorist organizations all over the country. They funded Hezbollah, sort of their shadow army out there terrorizing other folks. So it's pretty obvious what's going on to me. They're trying to access more nuclear power. Their own parliament called for nuclear war the other day, mentioned sending the missiles out. And of course, they don't have the missiles and they don't have the nukes anymore, but or that capability, thanks to President Trump. And of course, the Chinese are upset and the Russians are upset because all their missile defense systems is what Iran was using, and our aircraft have had pretty free will, and our missiles pretty much. So there's really a lot going on. I think the main thing you got to realize, and the world realizes, is our military is not being run by a bunch of men in dresses anymore. We've got real men and real women that are fighting, that are flying, that are launching missiles, etc. So, in my opinion, I think Trump just prevented a war. He's not starting a war. His war isn't with the people of Iran. It's with their miserable leaders, and most of them are gone now. So pray for peace, and hopefully the good people in Iran will get that opportunity to have peace. Thank y'all so much for sending me here.
Pretty dadgum good statement there from Tim Burchett. And I think he's thinking of it as a chessboard, or a risk board, rather, is the board game that I'm thinking of. The risk board is the map of the world, and you roll the dice, and you try to take over regions. And in this case, of course, if the Chinese are pushing into Iran, trying to create a hub in the Middle East and benefit from all of the oil, benefit from all of the regional control, that is not good for the United States. And so we're always, of course, trying to identify principles of what serves America and American interest. Other countries can have their justifications. They have to explain themselves, and they're very likely different than ours. But can you make the argument for control of the region, booting out some country who's very sympathetic with the Russians, with the Chinese, who was, I believe, facilitating their continual flows of oil and working adverse to American interest in the globe? I think that argument can be made. Whether you buy it or not is another argument. But for the Democrats to say that it's all illegal and there's no basis for it, I think is disingenuous. As usual, they're spring-loaded to oppose the president no matter what, even if their presidents use same powers under same rules and were able to deploy and bomb other countries. Trump's using those same powers. Now they're going to try to attack him for it. And of course, standards should be even across the board. And we see how oftentimes they're not. These things are exploited for political gain. But the war powers vote should be happening this week in both the House and the Senate. And we'll see how people fall on this one. A lot of Democrats like to talk a big game about how anti-war they are and about how opposed to Trump they are. But they also, I think, may recognize that there is some benefit to America and to their constituents, and we'll see how it unfolds. But we'll be here to cover it, my friends. Thank you for joining us in this very complex issue as we navigate it, and we'll see you here back again. Now, we're not done yet. Let's turn our attention to some standard fare. We got a Supreme Court case that has just happened today, and we're calling it the Supreme Court Ban Blowout. Let's see what you think about it. Starting right now, major set of oral arguments in the Supreme Court about a key issue in our country, the Second Amendment. We see this guy called Ali Daniel Hamani was charged with a gun crime. He was in his home, had firearms, had some other illegal substances in there, and he was prosecuted for that under federal law. Can't be in possession of firearms if you're an addict or if you use controlled substances. And so this whole thing landed in front of the Supreme Court, and I don't think it went well for the Pam Bondi DOJ. The official government position right now is that the law is valid, that they can prosecute you if you're a gun owner and you've got some other substance around. And the problem with that, of course, is that it's an infringement on your right, and it's also something that's very subjective. You have prosecutors who can just say, well, I don't like that drug, or I don't like that drug. And how do you compare and contrast that versus alcohol and vagrancy, like homelessness and other things? The Supreme Court got into it today. We've got a bunch of reaction queued up. Gorsuch was here. We've got Amy Coney Barrett. We have Brett Kavanaugh. And they were not in favor of the government's position, as we're about to find out. But here's the brief as it dropped. Some of the highlights for the respondent here, now appealing to SCOTUS, saying, help us out. Let's take a look at the arguments as we get to it. This is the background. He says, like tens of millions of Americans, this guy called Ali Hemani owned a handgun for self-defense. He had it safely secured in his home. And like many of those same Americans, he also consumed the marijuana a few days a week. According to the government, those two facts, little marijuana, which is legal in some states, and a gun, illegal possession of a firearm. They called him an unlawful user of a controlled substance, and he could face criminal penalties under this provision of federal law. 18 U.S. Code 922G3. Just for having a firearm. He wasn't smoking and blasting. He was smoking and in possession. And they charged him. Now, in reality, he says that is a draconian result. It violates the Second Amendment. The government's own analogs show that the nation's tradition is that you can be hammered. Our founders were hammered drunk all the time, and they wrote the Second Amendment, saying you can't strip anyone who consumes an intoxicant a few times a week of their right to keep and bear arms. Now, at the outset, it's critical to understand what this case is about and what it's not. While the government has much to say about addiction and substances other than marijuana, talking about cocaine and meth and all these other drugs, the government asked this court only about this case. They said this guy is charged with a crime, a federal crime. It prohibits the possession of a firearm by an unlawful user of a controlled substance. Just a user, not an addiction. Okay, this guy's not addicted to it. He just happened to use it. And as the government concedes, this prosecution is about the allegations and it rests on the habitual use of marijuana alone. So the only question is, if you consume marijuana a few times a week, can you possess a firearm? They say, obviously, you can. Pam Bondi's DOJ said, no, you can't. The charge should stick. Let's see what the Gun Owners of America and the Gun Owners Foundation and the Gun Owners of California and Heller and basically every other gun entity in the United States has to say about that, all listed right here. They filed an amicus brief and they summarized their argument for us in opposition to Pam Bondi. And there was a summary of the argument right here. They write, all right, Supreme Court, intoxicating substances and societal problems that they pose are nothing new. But the statute challenged here, 922G3, is new. This provision of the Gun Control Act of 1968 prohibits any unlawful user of a controlled substance from possessing a firearm. Don't even have to be high. Don't even have to be under the influence. They say this is illegal and it fails 4 times over. DOJ. First, the government builds its argument on the shakiest of historical foundations. It says that legislatures may disarm entire categories of people from their Second Amendment rights. It's not even about marijuana. It's just about the legislature saying, we don't like that, and we don't like that. And so now you don't have a gun right. You don't have a Second Amendment right. What? Why? Because they don't like what you're doing? That's not what the law says. That's not what the Second Amendment says. So they said, you can just deem somebody dangerous. So because Congress made that assessment with respect to drug users, the government claims that this is lawful. But the historical laws of the United States don't stand for this at all. Our founders were hammered all the time without any founding era analogs. Like they didn't pass any of that back then. Then you can't pass it now. They say the government attempts to disarm their people based on a law back during the founding era where they called them drunkards. There were drunkard laws, which took the form of vagrancy, civil commitment, and surety laws. But the first 2 out of the 3 categories were not even firearm regulations or gun laws at all. And so their precedent is irrelevant. In fact, there are contradictory traditions in American history. One that accommodated alcohol and drug use together with firearm possession free from criminal penalty. Okay, this is America. You want to be hammered and high and spinning around your guns? God bless our country. Indeed, it was the universal custom of the founding era militias to drink, to imbibe. Likewise, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and famous Americans possessed firearms while being users of drugs, ranging from opium to cocaine. It seems unlikely, and they used to have like cocaine like in your cough syrup. Remember seeing those old bottles? It's like cocaine, heroin, and a little bit of honey. A little bit of honey, some water, cocaine, and heroin. Here, this will solve your cough no problem. It seems unlikely that these previous generations would ever have approved a law like this. And fourth, the government cannot continue this. They're handpicking unsympathetic criminal defendants to justify their gun control. And our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's inadequate for the government of any other, which is a problem since we're invading our country with people who don't ascribe to these beliefs. The government's use of problematic defendants to undermine the rights of tens of millions of us is inappropriate. This court should decide the easy question and ignore the government's irrelevant character assassination of the respondent here, who may have a bunch of criminal past or something. So, of course, the government responded, and this was the brief of the United States. So Pam Bondi's DOJ, with D. John Sauer right here, says, no, actually, we can charge you. The gun laws are appropriate. We're allowed to criminalize certain categories of people based on consumption of something. They said, this case is not about the violation of the Second Amendment. This guy conceded to using marijuana. It's a Schedule I controlled substance. He said he used it every other day while he possessed a firearm. And I don't know if it's on his house or on his person or what, but that application is constitutional. This law stands, says Bondi. Laws disarming specific categories of people who present a special danger do have a long pedigree. And historically, habitual drunkards were subject to temporary disarmament. These laws are relevantly similar here, and it's not a violation of your Second Amendment right. Now, why? Because they know when they passed 922 G3 that mixing habitual illegal drug use or addiction with firearms could lead to dangerous behavior. And for centuries, similar concerns have prompted restrictions on habitual drunkards through vagrancy, civil commitment, and surety laws. And the rise of illegal drugs has also spurred other laws that temporarily disarm people. And so that's what we're doing now. We think that we should charge this person with a crime, and that's from the Trump DOJ, saying the law should stand, this guy should go to jail and suffer the criminal consequences. And the background on this is that he filed a motion to dismiss the indictment. So a grand jury indicted this guy back February 23, violating 922 G3, federal law. The indictment said August 22, Hamani knowingly possessed a Glock 19 9mm pistol while being an unlawful user of a controlled substance. The government said he used other drugs, marijuana, promethazine, and cocaine. Now, the pistol was located in the closet of his parents' home. Crucially, the prosecution did not allege that he was intoxicated or using a controlled substance at the time of the possession. The government's case rested on his status as a regular user, not on simultaneous use and possession. So he filed a motion to dismiss. He said this law is unconstitutional. I have a Second Amendment right. The district court for Texas granted the motion. In Texas, they dismissed it. They said, yeah, have a gun. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit affirmed the dismissal. Yep, have fun. They concluded that it was binding regional precedent, and they rendered the law's application to him unconstitutional. And we appeared in the Supreme Court today for oral arguments. And here is what one Supreme Court justice called Gorsuch had to say about it when he was asking questions of Sarah Harris, who is representing the Pam Bondi DOJ.
Well, Ms. Harris, on that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to, before we lose track of what Justice Sotomayor is talking about, one can ask whether the habitual drunkard statutes are sufficiently, the how and why is sufficiently analogous. One could also ask, though, more basically, whether this defendant would qualify as a habitual user. And I want to explore that before we lose track of it. habitual drunkard, the American Temperance Society back in the day said 8 shots of whiskey a day only made you an occasional drunkard. We have to remember the founding era if you want to invoke the founding era. To be a habitual drunkard, you had to do double that. Okay?
16 shots
John
of whiskey.
Adams took a tankard of hard cider with his breakfast every day. James Madison reportedly drank a pint of whiskey every day. Thomas Jefferson said he wasn't much of a user of alcohol. He only had 3 or 4 glasses of wine a night. Okay? Are they all habitual drunkards who would be properly disarmed for life under your theory?
No, and again, I think this is something...
Okay, if they're not, then what do we know about Mr. Hamani? We know he uses marijuana a few times, about every other day. That's all we have in the record, right?
That's all we have, and I'm
Okay,
not troubled by it.
so we don't even know the quantity of how much he uses every other day. What if he took 1 gummy bear with a medical prescription in Colorado? Well, you may not even need a medical
Just one
prescription.
little Haribo.
You don't even need that anymore. But let's say he had one to help him sleep every other day. Disarm him for life?
Well, no, it's not disarmed for life, and here's what's going
Potentially.
on.
Would that be enough under your theory? 1 gummy bear every other night with a medical prescription.
So I think you'd have a potential Rahave problem, but I will accept the hypothetical. So let me just deal with
I think
what's
the
an
answer is
unlawful
yes under the government's theory.
Yes, under our theory, but let me give you an explanation of 2 parts of this that are important. One, you asked about how do you tell who's an unlawful user? How is it more defined than a habitual drunkard? I think it's a lot clearer.
Is it? I mean,
yes.
the government has not been able to define what a user is. I mean, it is said at various points that it's someone who's used any illegal drug in the past year, right? It's said, ATF now wants to say a pattern. And you argue for habitual, which of course conflates the second half of the statute, which talks about an addict, which is different than a user, and an addict is an habitual user, it's defined as. So you're kind of conflating the 2 parts of the statute there. So tell me how it's so clear.
Okay, a couple of things to help you with this. One, I'm going to set aside the forfeiture issue, but I would like to return to that later, just deal with the substance. With respect to who is an unlawful user, the Court of Appeals are uniform in adopting the same view as us, which is it is a habitual user in context.
But the ATF disagrees.
No, they absolutely do not.
They say a pattern.
Let me be very clear about the distinction here. There is a distinction between what is the statutory definition of an unlawful user, and everyone has always agreed, including ATF, that that means habitual or frequent. And on the other hand, how do you prove that? What type of evidence is sufficient to show beyond a reasonable doubt, or for purposes of background checks for ATF purposes, that you in fact do that? So
okay,
that
so
is the
circles
discrepancy.
us back down to you would qualify as an habitual user, 1 gummy bear every other night.
Absolutely, and here's why. The check on that sort of situation is twofold. One is you have to know that you are using an unlawful drug. So if you're using your gummy and you don't know that it has THC in it or there's something else, you could have a nice Rahave defense. But setting that aside in terms of other guardrails, illegal drugs are different from habitual drunkards in an important way. First of all, there is robust post-ratification history that I think shows that there is a tight connection between someone who is a habitual drunkard.
So if it all boils down to illegality, what do we do with the fact that marijuana is sort of illegal and sort of isn't, and that the federal government itself is conflicted on this? It doesn't enforce it quite the same way it does with respect to drug laws with respect to other drugs.
So 2 points. One, it's not just illegality, but with respect to illegality, I don't think the government is of 2 minds. The government is considering rescheduling marijuana as Schedule 3 to facilitate potential medical applications, but the government is not saying that it is not illegal anymore simply because states are not following federal law. I think the fact that the Controlled Substances Act is involved, it brings this not just in terms of the category of illegality, but into the realm of how do you test the fit? How do you test if Congress is like prohibiting chewing gum or caffeine on the one hand, legal substances, versus substances that actually do have intoxicating, mind-altering effects.
Okay, but Ms. Harris, one of the difficult...
That is Amy Coney Barrett, and she jumped in there, and I think I have that picking up right here.
I wouldn't say you can't have a car, but as
hold on a second. That might be Kavanaugh. Let's go to this one. I've got a couple queued up.
Court has recognized from Heller onwards it's presumptive.
Oops, sorry about that. We were in 1.5 speed. Your boy was listening to this earlier, getting prepped for the show. Let's check this out here and see where we're at.
broadly unlawful use or goes above and beyond the constraints courts of appeals have identified, and this is something Chief Judge Colleton also pointed out. The knowing requirement does work here. That is important.
Do you think the government could prohibit a habitual drug user from owning a car?
Good question.
Owning a car with, I think that, I guess there would be various challenges with respect to takings and other types of property, and I think you would have a different, probably not, but the question for Second Amendment purposes is a different one, which is, are you someone who presents a special danger of misuse in that tradition? So for takings purposes or whatever else, the constraints are in that transaction.
It's a danger to have drug users, obviously, driving cars.
Right.
And I don't think you would find a history and tradition of saying, I mean, I think you could say there's a tradition of confinement and other restrictions, but with respect to the Second Amendment, the question is, do you present a special danger of misuse for firearms because of a historical category? Just like for felons, you probably wouldn't say you can't have a car, but as the court has recognized from Heller onwards, it's presumptively lawful to identify felons and the mentally ill as categories that may present a special danger of misuse.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting question, because you have a Second Amendment right to possess a firearm, shall not be infringed, and you don't have that anywhere embodied in the Bill of Rights to drive a car, and cars are very dangerous. So if they want to limit your ability to exercise a Bill of right, and they think that they're strong enough power to do that, then obviously they could ban you from driving a car, because you don't actually have an ensconced right for that at all. In fact, it's a privilege. It's really not a right. You got to go get a license and apply for a license, not go in there and get mandatorily handed one. So Kavanaugh, with a burner question, pulling those strings. Oh, if you can ban guns and charge people with crimes for that, why can't you do the same thing for cars?
Justice Barrett?
So, Ms. Harris, when you were going through with Justice Kagan the considerations in the Controlled Substances Act for winding up on one of the schedules, there are a panoply, right? And you can wind up for one reason and maybe not for another. Is proclivity to violence expressly one of the things that's taken into account in putting a drug on the schedule?
It is not in the statutory criteria. The way I do think it often works out is the DEA may provide evidence with respect to the drug in connection with crimes, but obviously it's not one of the fixed statutory criteria. Again, I don't think that's a problem for the reasons we've discussed, which is you also don't have findings with respect to the mentally ill or other categories.
I mean, I understand that. I think where I'm stuck, I agree with you that you don't need to have just alcohol because that's all there was at the finding, and that would be trapped in amber. Let's say that I think that the principle is, if you have reason to know that someone would pose a risk of violence is dangerous, that the legislature can disarm. I guess when I look at these drugs, however, I mean, Robitussin, Ambien, Tylenol with codeine, testosterone, Adderall, I mean, none of those drugs strike me, I mean, I'm not a pharmacologist, but none of those drugs strike me as drugs for which it is obvious that a risk of violence would ensue. Is it your position that all of the drugs that I just mentioned would pose a risk of violence and dangerous behavior?
So what I'm saying is those drugs in Schedule 4 and Schedule 5.
Well, actually, Adderall is in Schedule 2.
Okay. Just with, yes, I'm sorry, I'm less familiar with Adderall on the scheduling.
It's
but
speed.
With respect to these categories of drugs,
amphetamines.
whichever schedule they're on, you have to be using them habitually and not for their prescribed purpose. So yes, our position is if you are in that category, you are doing something that is...
So it's the lawfulness, because what if you're a college student and you take your roommate's Ritalin twice a week because you think it's going to help you take exams?
Yeah, and I think we're going to get to a place where you're into ketamine and other drugs, ketamine being Schedule 3, it's a lesser version of PCP.
So the problem is that if you take Adderall, then you slide into other drugs?
I think it is a problem of who decides what the adequate proxy for dangerousness is. And if you wanted to go on...
But you said, and I think it's clear when you look at the Controlled Substances Act, dangerous is not necessarily the primary reason why, or even a reason why all of these drugs land on the list. And so I guess my concern is, let's say that I think Congress could make a determination, maybe, I don't know. I mean, there was just an article in the New York Times about the dangers of marijuana, and, you know, maybe that's true. Maybe THC concentrations are higher nowadays, and that does have bad effects on, bad mind-altering effects, and maybe it gives rise to violence. I just don't see that, my concern, and maybe you can dispel it. My concern is I just don't see that that determination was made here.
I guess I would point you to, again, if you wanted comfort with respect to marijuana in particular, the whole history of rescheduling, the determinations made with respect to that substance, et cetera. And I think the other thing to consider is if
and
you
where does it say that it leads to violence?
There are
history.
First of all, I guess I'd point to the court's cases, which many of which are cases in which there is a strong connection between marijuana use and violence. But I would just take a step back and say, if that is the key, if you have to have some determination that, say, the mentally ill or particular drugs present a risk of dangerousness as opposed to the common sense notion backed by all of this evidence, backed by these processes, that when you are frequently using these mind-altering substances, you are in the class of people who present a special danger of misuse just so long as you're habitually doing it. I think that's more of a guardrail. There's no such thing for habitual drunkards. No one was going around saying habitual drunkards are, as a class, unsafe because the justice of the peace isn't saying this particular habitual drunkard is too unsafe to do anything.
Actually, I'm glad you asked that. This is my last question. This goes back to your colloquy with Justice Alito, and you were talking about how as-applied challenges would be unworkable. What about as-applied challenges? You know, let's put aside the possibility of as-applied challenges being required as to each individual defendant, you know, an as-applied challenge to Mr. Hamani in particular. What about an as-applied challenge just to that particular drug? Why can't Mr. Hamani simply say, you don't have to take into account all of my personal circumstances, but, you know, government, I would like to put you to your proof about whether marijuana has an established link to violence.
Right, and I think if you look at the Third Circuit's opinion in Harris, the kind of questions that you would adduce to answer that question, unless you are not willing to accept a connection, the intuitive and historically grounded connection between intoxicating substances and the dangers they present and the idea that they are in fact dangerous and might lead to violence, I think you have a real problem with—
So the person with Robitussin shouldn't be able to, who's caught with Robitussin and uses it for coughing and sleeping, you know, 3 nights a week, that person can't make an as-applied challenge.
I think the government is willing to entertain the idea, as we would with like sugar or caffeine, that if there is not sort of a factual record, but I think here, again, you can either carve out Schedule 5 or do some other things.
So you're not rejecting out of hand the possibility of as-applied challenges to the particular drugs, you're just resisting that it would apply as to marijuana.
I'm resisting the idea that it could be constitutionally required for Second Amendment purposes, because I think you would be fundamentally altering the Rahimi framework in a problematic way by discounting the ways in which the modern analog of 922G3 is more tailored and only focusing on the idea that you need like some exact comparator, as if you could go back in time and figure out exactly the mental effects of intoxication to figure out how violent someone is. I think that's an impossibility.
Justice Jackson?
Nope. Got to pause on Jackson. Don't want to ... wait for it. Here I think I've got Sotomayor queued up. A lefty judge with a good question. She says, well, can you just also ban homeless people from buying guns if you're talking about people who are, you know, maybe not well?
So would you argue that it's okay to impose a ban on homeless people who are not drug addicts, but just merely homeless? Because vagabonds?
For Second Amendment purposes, no, we don't think so. And here's the difference.
And why is that?
Yes, I think the difference, two things. One is the point with respect to the specific application here, and two is a methodological point about Rahimi, I think. So here's the reasons. Being homeless is not itself a crime. Being homeless is not, at least in many, there are things additional to it for due process purposes. It is not unlike illegal drug usage, something associated with the public safety concerns historically. There is not a robust post-ratification history the same way. These are the kind of constraints you'd look at. On top of that,
the danger of habitual alcohol users was not merely the fact that they were using an intoxicating substance.
Right.
The way habitual was defined was that the state of intoxication didn't permit you to have a regular life. All the definitions around habitual alcoholics centered around not merely taking the drug, but the potential effect it had on you because you couldn't control it and would continue to use it. You were acting responsibly towards your family. You were sleeping in the streets. You were doing other things that showed that it incapacitated you. Now, it's hard for me to see how given that drugs there are different kinds of drugs with different kinds of effects, different kinds of duration. We have the illegal ambient user who shouldn't be using the sleeping drug but is. We have a marijuana user that you say regular is defined by 2 or 3 or every other day, but how about the marijuana user who uses it only 1 day a week and not in their home where the gun is? I mean, there was a definition and a situation with habitual alcoholic users that's different than this.
So 2 points. One with respect to the historical definition of habitual drunkards, and 2 with respect to why I think that 922G3 is more tailored and easier to justify than modern day regulations. Habitual drunkards as a category were defined certainly for civil commitment and vagrancy purposes. There were no individualized dangerousness findings. It was a sort of judgment made often by magistrates or justices of the peace as to whether someone's conduct was frequent and putting them in the status of a drunkard. So habitual did mean frequent or regular. The drunkard piece is what does the work, I think, in a lot of your questions with respect to the level of intoxication. Second, why I think it's not a problem that there is translation of that level of intoxication for habitual drunkards to illegal drug users here. I think 922G3 is a lot more tailored. There's no like founding era breathalyzers to tell you exactly how intoxicating things are. For 922G3, what's happening is you have, first of all, a restriction that is tailored and temporary and less restrictive because it is tailored to how often you're using it within your control.
All right, so that is Sotomayor, and let's see if we can grab some Alito on this. I think we know where he's going to be on it. We already saw Clarence Thomas had like one quick question at the beginning and he was out.
So why do you need...
That's like an even bigger jump. If you
what those who adopted
make determinations plus the temporary nature of the restrictions.
What about other unlawful or illegal drugs such as anabolic steroids?
Anabolic steroids, I believe, are either Schedule 3 or Schedule 4. So I would give similar answers to Justice Barrett with respect to my front line and my backup. I think the front line is there are the same kind of judgments that are being made. My backup is if there are concerns with respect to how you go sort of down the schedule, the government only cares really about prosecuting Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, and that's the tightest level of determinations. You have to find a serious danger of abuse, and any sort of alternative approach is going to throw out the heroin, the fentanyl, the ketamine, those kinds of things.
So other than the danger of abuse, does there have to be some sort of implicit danger in the drug, the effects of the drug itself?
That is usually part of the scheduling determination. So it includes the addictiveness, but also you can look even at the recent notice of proposed rulemaking with respect to marijuana, mentioning that DEA in this process normally comes forward with public safety evidence with respect to other risks. And so that is part of the calculus, and I think is pretty tight in it.
Thank you.
Justice Alito?
Most of the most commonly used illegal drugs either had not been invented at the time of the adoption of the Second Amendment or the adoption of the 14th Amendment. Heroin was invented in 1874, cocaine, 1855, methamphetamine, 1893, fentanyl, 1959. Marijuana existed, but my understanding, hemp was grown for industrial purposes. My understanding is that it was not consumed to any degree by people in the United States until at least the beginning of the 20th century. Is that consistent with your understanding of the situation?
That is correct.
So we don't know what the founders, what those who adopted the First Amendment or, the Second Amendment or the 14th Amendment thought about illegal drug use per se.
Correct.
There's a lot of talk about alcohol. Do you think that the regulation of alcohol is exactly the same as the regulation of illegal drugs? Doesn't it have a different place in the history and culture of the West? Aren't there a lot of people who consume alcohol in moderation and have done so for centuries primarily for purposes other than the effect that it has on one's brain?
Absolutely, and I think that's why the post-ratification history is so difficult for respondent here with respect to the difference between illegal drugs and the history of alcohol use in moderation.
Now, as to Justice Barrett's question about Ambien, which I think is quite important, do you think that as a practical matter it is feasible for there to be as-applied challenges to the use of every drug on the schedule?
No, and I think Chief Judge Colleton's recent dissent in Lavina illustrates a lot of these problems in terms of how do you know exactly how much someone's taking? If it's an illegal drug, what's in it? How do you know exactly what the concentration is? What else are they mixing with other things? At what point do you might have a tipping point situation where someone goes into a greater risk of addiction or having additional mind-altering effects? These are really hard judgments, and those are the kind of judgments that go into scheduling determinations.
922G sets out a whole list of categories of people who Congress presumably thought created a special danger with regard to the possession of drugs. Do you see a ground on which one might say an individualized determination is required for G3 but not for any of the other categories in G?
I think that would be difficult, and if you did so, you'd be taking down G2, which is particularly hard to fathom. That's fugitives. So I don't know how someone would say, how dangerous is this particular fugitive in the moment? Like, did they just get scared? What's going on? Or other parts of G4, and then there's a lot of issues with respect to G1, but I think we could all agree it would be passing strange to suggest that it's constitutionally required for serial murderers to be subject to individualized dangerousness determinations for Second Amendment purposes.
Thank you.
Justice Sotomayor?
Okay, that was Sotomayor. Let's hit one more, see if we can grab one more clip from somebody, and then we'll call it.
We have not made a policy choice with respect to what's happening, but sort of conduct in your home. So I think if you're looking
at a prescription and I don't, what is it about Ambien itself?
We got that one.
Sorry.
No.
922G3 has two prongs, as we've
I
discussed.
think that's Gorsuch. I think we got it. So we heard from multiple judges, even Sotomayor. Sotomayor is saying, I don't really understand the distinction between what you're trying to categorize as something that's prohibited and based on other, vagrancy laws and drunkenness laws. Where is the nexus? And I think what we're really getting to when we unpack all of it is that it feels subjective. It feels a little squishy. The government can come in, categorize some people. There's no real connection to dangerousness or to any real harm. And why would you prohibit somebody's constitutional right if there's not basically a rational basis to connect it to a law? We have these constitutional tests that we talk about: rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. And if the law is going to infringe on one of your constitutional rights, it better be very narrowly tailored to accomplish that goal and be the least necessary means of prohibiting that conduct. It's got to be very, very specific. And I think all the judges that we heard from today didn't quite see it there. So from our perspective, it looks like it's going to be a win for the Second Amendment. And for whatever reason, the Pam Bondi DOJ, standing by the current interpretation, the current law, to say that Congress can categorize groups of people as dangerous, take away their Second Amendment rights like this guy. And I saw some great questions in the chat. How did this occur? We don't really know. The FBI got a search warrant to conduct a search of a Texas home of this guy. So they might have been looking for something else. And then they found this and they decided to make this the test case and see if they could get a conviction on it. But according to the Rockefeller Institute, in U.S. versus Hamani, the FBI obtained a search warrant to conduct a search of his home. During the search, they discovered a Glock 9mm pistol and cannabis. And then he admitted that he smokes cannabis every other day. And then he was indicted for 922G3. And that was back before Pam Bondi came in. But of course, they are picking up the rule, and they're basically saying they can charge you if you're in a situation like that. Another good reason, if you're ever being investigated, invoke your right to remain silent. I do not answer those questions is one way to say it. Another way to say it is I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer, and tell them to stop asking you questions. so that you don't get charged for exercising your Second Amendment right in whatever context is happening. But that's the Supreme Court. I expect to see that it will be a victory for the Second Amendment. The decision likely to be affirmed from the Fifth Circuit. And as Gorsuch even said, the people who wrote the Second Amendment were getting hammered. 8 shots of whiskey a day didn't even make you a drunk. Interesting times. All right, but my friends, it's been a beautiful stream. Thanks for joining us on the day. We now will hear from you. I saw some great donos and super chats. Thank you for all of those. Today we talked about the War Powers Act and what's going on with Iran and how this whole thing is being perverted by the Democrats as usual, screaming and shouting about illegal wars, even though we were just in multiple of their illegal wars for a long time. They're going to try to reverse this and say there's no standard and Trump is abusing the law and all this crap, which of course is nonsense. And so we'll see the battle play out this week. We have War Powers resolution votes. Sounds like going to be Wednesday, maybe Thursday this week in both the House and the Senate. And we'll see what our so-called elected officials say and where they fall on this issue. Then we had a little Supreme Court news and got some, I think, interesting updates. Very interesting case, actually. And it's curious why Pam Bondi is such an adherent to these laws and why she is prosecuting people when the gun owners of America and basically every institution that is concerned about the Second Amendment joined in opposition to her, filed this amicus brief. And it looks like, I think they'll be successful, but you never know. Supreme Court will come down on it. We'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. It's been a beautiful day. Happy Monday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing. We're going to have a jamming week. We've got Judiciary Committee hearings starting tomorrow, and we should have some interesting votes in Congress, and I'm sure we'll have some more election news and other updates. So thank you for joining us and being here as the world continues on. Grateful for our time together. Hey, what's going on? We got Donut Mind Me, Muffin Rando. We got John in the house. Great to see everybody. Friends, we got some new Membo friends too. We had a great members only stream this morning where we talked a bunch more Iran and all trying to figure out what the hell's going on over there. And so we appreciate you joining us as we navigate that issue and more. Oh, Blood Moon. Yeah, we got a Blood Moon sitch. Oh, it's Nancy Pelosi. Look at this. Nancy Pelosi with her gavel. Look how excited she is. Way too excited in that image. What is she going to do with it? Golly, I don't know. Hey, shout out to our oil drillers. Oilfield Mike. What's up, Oilfield Mike? Welcome aboard, Oilfield Mike, our newest membo. Grab the stream from this morning. Grab the stream from Saturday when we saw the news breaking on Iran. And Oilfield Mike, join us tomorrow morning for our members only stream. You can sign up on YouTube as a membo, sign up on, or just go over there for free on Substack or join us on Locals right now. And we'll see you tomorrow on the members only stream. Although you already signed up, Mike. We'll see you tomorrow. Hey, what's up? Rub some dirt on it. There is a lunar eclipse in the early morning hours tomorrow. Don't miss it, Blood Moon. Thank you for honoring my name. Rub some dirt on it. I took a picture of a blood moon one time in my whole life. So I'm now officially Robert Blood Moon Gouveia. I didn't make it up. It's the rules. Hey, what's going on? So tomorrow, here's the time. Tomorrow, depending on where you're at, look up your time zone, if you can read it, and you'll have blood moon. It's going to be early, all right? So like 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, get your booty up, get some coffee, try to figure out your telescope, and you too can be blood moon, just like me. Hey, what's going on? Thank you, Rub Some Dirt on it. That's our official galaxy observer out there. Hey, this one, Tim Jake. What's going on, Tim Jake? Hey, referencing the morning stream, thank you, Tim, for being a membo and being number one in the chat. You rock. Says, most people have forgotten, Clinton said U.S. troops would be in Bosnia for 18 months. The reality, 10 years. U.S. troops are still peacekeeping in Kosovo 26 years after that war ended. Yeah. Well, and I remember like living through that with Iraq and Afghanistan. I thought that they said mission accomplished. It was game over. They're going to go vote. Fingers are painted purple, whatever. And then it just keeps going on and on and on. Then we exit Afghanistan. We lose 13 more Americans. It's like nonstop. So yeah, it's very frustrating. And I don't want dead Americans at all. At all. It makes me sick, actually, to my stomach to even think about that. About, these families getting calls. Oh, yeah, your kids are dead now. For what? Iran. For what? I don't know. But, they signed up to serve their country. They're serving their country. They're following their commander in chief. And so we pray for them and their families. But it is never just as quick as it is, as they say it's going to be. And you know, our government, the media, the power brokers, they have no problem lying to us right through their teeth. They lie right into the camera. And they say, I've never been to the island. I never saw him again. And then you get the pictures of them walking around in flip-flops on the island. Thank you, Tim Jake. Yeah. Hey, prayers up for our servicemen and women, man. We appreciate you guys. Mark Burton, what's up? 5 new membos. Mark Burton, Jack Burton. Does he have lipstick on? What movie is that? Ida Bell, welcome. Alicia Bradshaw, what's up? Nicole Mays, Mr. Hyde, Live Free or Die, all gifted membos. Mark Burton, thank you for being a membo. Thanks for bringing in 5 new membos. We'll see everybody in the morning. Thank you for joining up. Hey, Sev Russ, count some cash. Is that me? No, I definitely don't have a bed of cash, that's for sure, but that looks comfy. Hey, Sev Russ, what's up? 5 membos coming in. Thank you, Sev Russ, for bringing in 5 new membo friends. You rock. We appreciate you. We got Gwen Orette. We got A Crying Shame. What's up, David Duarte? Tath, Gath, Gouveia in the house. And Healthy Mama ID. All gifted membos, man. Severus, we appreciate you. Hopefully your week is off to a beautiful start. Thank you for being here. Gauntlet KI. Citizens want blank to invade them. And what percentage is needed? From Gauntlet KI. 6 months as a member. 2/3 of the way to full term. Thank you, Gauntlet. Citizens want blank to invade them. The United States. What percentage are needed? I really don't know where this comment's going. Are you saying like America should make votes on wars kind of a thing? Like if a certain percentage of the populace says, let's go, make this regime change, only then can it happen? From Gauntlet KI. Maybe if we actually governed ourselves, but I don't think we really do. How can you govern yourselves when 70% of the country wants the SAVE Act passed and 70% of the country doesn't want Iran regime change, and they actually do the Iran regime change and you lose on the SAVE Act? You're like, okay, this whole Democratic Republic thing feels a little bit weird. Hey, Waldo, 1 new membo. Thank you, Waldo, for being a membo, aka Clay. Cast your Clay in the house, aka Senior Clay. What's up, Senior Clay? Senor Clay, maybe. 1 new membo coming in. Christina, 99, gifted a membo courtesy of Waldo. Thank you, Waldo, and welcome, Christina. We'll see you in the morning. Gaius Macius in the house from Rome. As far as I'm concerned, this war started on November 4th, 1979. It's been ongoing since then. This is going to end the war decisively. Dems can go urinate up a rope. It's pretty interesting feat there. How do you do that? I mean, men have some trajectory and aim, but women, I'm not sure how they'll work that one out. But thank you, Gaius Macius. We appreciate that. Yeah, and the Iranian history is just long and complicated. And it feels like the United States and the CIA and MI6, we were reading about this on Saturday, were there, messing around, putting people they want in charge, and then taking them out, and then it's like around and around we go, and it always feels like there are unintended consequences that backfire right in our faces, and we're responsible for it. So that's where a lot of the reticence gets in. And, it's like just a big game of risk, playing around with things, and then things spiral out of control, and we end up paying the price for it, unfortunately. Baby Lewis, more Americans were killed in Chicago this weekend than there was in Iran. Democrats won't say much about deaths in Chicago because it's not actually about caring for people. It's about what they see as politically useful. From Jeffrey. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Baby Lewis. Yeah, they don't care about Epstein victims. They don't care. They just want to use it to attack the Republican Party and call Trump the Epstein class, which is being done to good effect, by the way, because the Republicans are not playing in that arena and thereby losing by default. Same thing with illegal aliens. They don't care about immigrants. They care about votes. They don't care about people being deported. They care about voters being deported and their political base being decentralized and, disseminated across the planet rather than in their district in Somalia, Ilhan. So we don't, it's not that they're against war. They're for war. They just don't want Trump's war. They'd rather be in charge of the war so that Zelensky can give them all kickbacks via the Ukraine money. Baby Lewis, what's up, Baby Lewis? Thank you for the dono. You're on 2 locations? Oh, right there. Thank you, Baby Lewis. Hey, you're getting a Rickroll. How does that one go? Rick, that was not good. Rick D. 5 new membos. Rick D. Thank you, Rick, for bringing in 5 new friends. Gail 2025 is here. Orphan Annie, what's up, Dark Pyro? We got Curtis Bartles here. David Rowley, welcome, and Copperwise. All gifted membos, courtesy of Rick D. Maybe sent that out of an airplane. Yeah, here you go, Schlista. I suggest that the War Powers Act is unconstitutional anyway. They can't limit the president's constitutional powers. Founders never intended to have a huge standing military. Congress raises and authorizes active military numbers and funds. The president does what he wants in foreign affairs. Congress needs to either move away from an active force and go to reserve and or cut funds from the military to limit what the president can do with it. Yeah, that's the War Powers Act has been debated for a long time, and much on those premises. How can Congress delegate? Because here's what happens is they delegate some over. Like, you can't declare war, okay? But you can engage in hostilities. Okay, well, what is a hostilities? Kind of sounds like a war. Well, it's not. So you can go attack people, but only for 60 days. Okay. And then we just get like continuing authorization for use of military force on and on and on. And we can just have a war without really calling it a war because there's political capital to do that. It's a delegation of congressional power, right? It's really pathetic. Like if we had actual leadership in Congress, maybe actual representation in Congress, they would actually lead. But they don't want to. They'd rather just defer all this to the president and then whine and moan about it when it's politically useful for them, which is why I think at least a vote on it will anchor them down and they'll have to honor it. Hey, shout out to this guy. What's his name? The Warrior. Says, if we have to wait for today's Congress to declare war, we'll be speaking Chinese or Russian. Yeah, because they won't do anything, like anything at all, other than spend money. They'll spend money, but that's about it. The past, big, beautiful bills or whatever, as long as it's filled with pork that they can take back to their constituents. But otherwise, they won't do it. LZ, thank you for the nice dono, The Warrior. LZ, Rob, the War Powers Act was passed to stop the Vietnam War, which had dragged on for 10 years. It took away the power of the president to carry on an endless war. Before that, the president could do whatever with the military with no constraints. And yeah, so Congress passes something to kind of rein the president in. They could also, just could have impeached him, or they could have defunded something. But I understand the argument. And I think Congress did it by design, by the way, so that they could give the president basically carte blanche to operate and conduct these hostilities, deal with these hostilities without actually having to declare war. And then those just exist in perpetuity. We end up bombing Libya and all these other countries. So it's like never ending. Hey, Ravicus. Over the last week or two, I have noticed you have a lot more energy and are more focused. Really? I notice, and it is appreciated. Well, thank you, Ravicus. What could I attribute that to? Not sleeping any better. Coffee consumption hasn't changed. It must just be the spirit of liberty has reinvigorated me. I really can't place it, Ravicus. I went on a nice hike on Sunday with my beautiful wife. We have a baby coming. Maybe that's it. Little new energy, little new pep in the step. That's probably it. G-Men, I knew they were thank you, Ravicus, for the nice compliment. We appreciate that. And thank you for, contributing the energy. It's very symbiotic. So we're happy about that. G-Men, I knew they were lying about the jab when the state of North Carolina began paying people to get it. Yeah, or you get like the most disgusting creatures who are running our country, like, what was the mayor or the governor of New York who was eating French fries? He was like, I love getting jabbed in my neck. He's like eating on camera like a disgusting slob. Remember that? Go get your jab. I love this hamburger. Go to McDonald's, get a hamburger, and get a jab in your neck. You're like, oh, gosh. We're in big trouble. Yeah, G-Man. The thing about that, though, is that you can kind of deduce what's going on. Just go talk to people. Hey, you got the jab. How you doing? You're like, oh, I don't know. I just got COVID. You're like, well, that's weird. That's pretty weird. I thought you weren't supposed to get it. Because they said it was 100% and then 99% and then up 97%. And then like it's like, oh, 70%. Oh, we don't talk about it anymore. So you can validate that. But what we have seen here is it's very difficult to validate much of anything because it's on the other side of the planet and everything is classified and nobody knows really anything. So Rick D, here's a video of Hillary losing it during her depo. Oh, that came out? Amazing. Thank you, Rick D. All right, we'll hang on to that one. So Hillary, she probably saw Bill getting another massage. Could you imagine? And another massage and another massage with, young women. She's like, this is ridiculous. How much of this do I have to take? It's your husband, Hillary. You could have divorced him a long time ago. Gauntlet KI, Project Artichoke, the CIA, mind control vaccines. Oh gosh, what was I listening to? Yeah, something. It's reminding me of something. Oh, I think I saw that the short form videos also rot your brains, which I think is probably true. No scientific validity on that. But yeah, I think there was a study that said that the more short form video you watch, the more your brain just rots away. Which is probably why the Chinese introduced it as TikTok and why half our country's addicted to it. Perfect. Gaius Macius. I'm pretty sure the Iranians targeted the NATO RAF base in Cyprus. Article 5 of the NATO Charter, anyone? That requires the Europeans, I think, right, to come to NATO's aid. Do they have any military at all? We saw some European diplomat, like, criticizing America. Like, get out of here. A European diplomat criticizing our military? No thanks. How about you sit down, let the adults handle this, okay? You guys can't even defend your own continent from the Russians. You need us to do it for you, too. So don't lecture us, Europeans. Thank you, Gaius. I don't know what's going on there, but I thought I saw the French might be getting involved. I think England is basically bailing out and didn't let us use their bases. But it would be nice to have a coalition. Okay, so the U.S. is not solely on the hook. Like if Iran is as big a problem as they say Iran is, then we should have no problem getting a bunch of friends around the country to say, all right, enough of these guys already. Cardinal O'Flanagan, hey, how did isolationism go in World War II? Wasn't there a Pearl Harbor something? How'd that go? Well, yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, it probably was because FDR, kind of let Pearl Harbor happen. I think there's some evidence of that. To drag us into the war, the Japanese come over, blow us up, and then we have to declare war. As soon as we declare war on Japan, then the Germans declare war on us, and boom, we're right in the middle of it. But I think that they knew that the Japanese were coming, didn't they? For Pearl Harbor, I think that's pretty clear. And I wouldn't say that we were isolationists in World War II. I mean, we were sending a ton of stuff over to Europe. We had to deal with the Germans, right? The U-boats were blowing up ships all over the place. Was that World War II? Yeah. Cardinal, thank you for that. Who's this person? Hey, what's up, Slick? Good to see you. In Afghanistan and Iraq, we weren't allowed to take everything the enemy loves away, like during World War II, which forces the enemies to surrender. Enemies use our rules of engagement against us, not anymore. Yeah, and man, shout out. Thank you for that, Slick. Sounds like you were over there. We appreciate that. Yeah, it wasn't like a war. It was like a nation-building endeavor where you're saying, you're going to be Democrats just like us. You're going to be democratic country with a republic, and you're going to have free speech and liberty. And they're like, we don't want any of that crap. We're not white Europeans, okay? We don't want any of that crap. So they just said, no, we're not interested. And it's Iraq and Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, for sure, like we left $80 billion worth of equipment over there and lost 13 people on the way out. So if you're going to engage in war and the goal is to just wipe out the country, I think they could probably do that in 30 days and then hand it off to the people. And I guess we're out. But we were talking about this morning too, Slick. I think I remember, I didn't check this, but I thought Mike Huckabee, back when he was campaigning for president during one campaign, maybe the one versus McCain and Obama, they were asking about that. What should we do? And he said, we can't just leave because we broke it. Once you break it, you buy it. You got to fix it. You got to stay around to fix it forever. And we're like, oh, great. And we saw what that got us. So not much. Like if you're going to go defeat your enemy and defeat them so that they're good and dead and they don't ever stand back up again and you can leave and then the people can reclaim the country and the region can rebuild the nation versus America. And you don't have to deal with this, like 40-year metastasizing cancer. That's an argument that, I can understand. Thank you, Slick. Hey, G-Men, what's up? G-Men NC. 24 months as a membo, 2 years. So I started smoking and blasting. That reminds me of, there was like a Danny DeVito clip. Danny DeVito. And so I started blasting. And he's a funny little guy. So it was a funny clip. I think that was like from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or something like that. So I started smoking and blasting. Well, Pam Bondi, won't be happy about that if she catches you. Mock Schnell, 20 new membos. Mock Schnell, thank you for doing this. Piano Dean, what's up? Texas and Knock. We got Doug is here. Ridgecrest. Miss Kelly, welcome. Fred Hada Jr. We got Jay Blow, Jay McTiernan, Johnny Boy, Karit is here, KC9 AOP. What's up? Sunday Gravy. Rebecca Gable, Judith Peters, Spartsick, Spaztic Chick. We got Jennifer Damron, Lotboy, Zilledge, Alan McMahon, and Lexi. All gifted membos courtesy of Mock Schnell. Stocks must be up. Thank you, Mock Schnell. Slick. Hey, Temu, China, and Russia air defense weapons are on sale now. The Pakistan-India conflict and the war in Ukraine and Venezuela operations have really tanked arms sales for Russia and China. Yeah, and I'm hearing also the Taiwan conflict come into this. In other words, if the Chinese don't have the oil from the Iranians and they don't have oil from Venezuela, you're slowly there's a stranglehold around Chinese influence. So then if they take Taiwan and the whole planet does what they did with Russia and issue these massive sanctions and basically cut them off from oil, then the Chinese can get their oil from Russia, but they're not getting it from the Middle East anymore. They're not getting it from South America anymore. And so a sanction might be a big dissuader, right? In other words, they'll say, we can't go after Taiwan because everyone's going to cut us off and our whole country will flounder and fail unless they get it from the Russians. But then that prevents the war, right? That prevents the Chinese. Like if you game it out, I know it's like this, that, and the other, and it's a bunch of causes. You have to connect them all. So you're kind of far removed from the conflict now. But if taking Iran prevents the Chinese from taking Taiwan because they don't have a regional ally that will backstop that effort, that makes sense to me, like geopolitically. Even if I say, well, how is Iran in America's interest? Well, if it stops the Chinese from taking Taiwan, that's definitely in our interest. So you can at least make those arguments. Even if you're not interested, as we are very reticent on foreign wars and regime changes, having lived through them our whole lives. Hey, it's Jerry Seinfeld. Debbie. Almost like Newman. Newman. Debbie, oh, hey, I realize this is a history lesson for many. However, I was alive then and very aware. Islamic terrorism was birthed around 1979. How can people not see the end of the Islamic terrorism as an outgrowth of the current actions? The end of Islamic terrorism as an outgrowth of the current actions. That's a great question. I mean, that is a great question. If there is no more terrorism, like if there is no more ISIS, there's no more beheadings, there's no more IEDs, that would be a pretty big win, right? Terrorism. I don't know that we're going to get there. I think some people are concerned that it might lead to more terrorism and that this can create, blowback that will last for a long time. But it's a great question. And that might exactly be the White House's perspective on this, is that enough already, right? Like this has been kind of this ongoing slow burn that has been a big problem for multiple countries around the regions. The regional powers don't want to do anything about it. The United States is only capable of doing something about it. If we don't act now, the Chinese will send their hypersonics in there and take over the region. We cannot allow that to happen. So it's an interesting question, Debbie-O. Interesting indeed. Thank you for the dono too. Slick, I wanted to thank the U.S. Marines that prevented the U.S. consulate in Pakistan from being overrun. They unleashed hell on 22 now deceased Pakistanis. I saw the video of that. Yeah, that was a brutal scene. They were banging the doors in, and the Marines just, man, I don't know if they were on marijuana or what. That's a joke. But they started blasting, and they were carrying bodies out. And we know the alternative, right? That's a war. If they would have gotten in there, those Marines would be dead. So it's a war zone. The Marines fired back, and they were carrying out gruesome bodies out of that scene. It was not good. Hey, King of Biltong. We are the lowest priced direct-to-consumer biltong brand in the whole galaxy. Biltong USA does not cover or overcharge for junk. We make real biltong. Check it out at Biltong USA and use code Robert, and you'll save 10% off. And you'll get some big, thick, juicy meats. Hey, this old guy. Wow, if Jefferson, Madison, and Adams were drunk when they penned the Constitution, is that the same as drunk texting? It's hilarious, this old guy. I didn't realize how many drinks they had, but there was this book called The Alcoholic Republic. I remember it. Yeah, The Alcoholic Republic. I was probably looking at this book when I was an alcoholic, and I was like, well, if the founders can drink, I'm glad I don't drink anymore. But I was definitely at like James Madison level, 100%. Probably more than Thomas Jefferson. He's like 3-4 glasses of wine. It's like, no. I wasn't a habitual drunkard, but, you know, like 8 shots of whiskey, that sounds pretty, you know, that sounds like reasonable. Like for a night, you know, after a long day, you know, this old guy. It's why I don't drink anymore. And I'm much better for it. Crawfish Creative Media. What's going on? 7 months as a membo. I think talking about the Supreme Court case, the government's position on this is super weak. I know. It is weak. And I don't know why the DOJ is still defending it. I mean, they're not big fans of the Second Amendment. We saw Judge Jeanine Pirro come out and say what she said about the Second Amendment. If you bring a gun to my district, you're going to jail. Like, wow. Oh, that's great. If we are like, even if you're not a criminal, you just bring a gun into the district. She says, that's it. You're going to jail. And then she walked that back a lot, but like we heard what she said. And then you see the DOJ, the Pam Bondi DOJ standing behind broad categories of people who should be disarmed because of some other drug. Mrs. Spock, I don't get it. Why is the Bondi DOJ trying to give Dems a way to disarm us in the future? Well, they also want to extend that. They want to take that to SSRIs. If you're on pharmaceuticals, they want to red flag you. You're dangerous. This is a category that's dangerous. So red flag for you, red flag for you. For what? Well, because we don't like something you're doing or something you said. So how does that extend out? Okay, if they can hit like a marijuana or a red flag like for an SSRI, which was contemplated a lot, then why wouldn't they just say, well, your speech, man, the things that you're saying is pretty dangerous. It's pretty racist or transphobic or whatever. And so maybe you should be, you know, limited. It's not a prohibition on free speech. Don't get us wrong. You can say what you want, but and there's an element of dangerousness to it. And so we just have to limit your right to a firearm because it's a little too dangerous. And who is deciding these things? Some prosecutorial hack, somebody at the DOJ who didn't like this guy. It was I don't know why he had a search warrant. He might have been involved in a bunch of other bad things and they couldn't get him on those things. Like probably not an upstanding dude, maybe, I don't know. But they wanted to make an example out of him. They picked somebody who was probably a very bad defendant and said, this is the one. Took it up. And I hope they lose, honestly. I don't know why they're defending these positions. There are other charges to hit people with. You don't need to make up something that criminalizes a broad swath of the population. This old guy, pretzel thinking by our government should reach the conclusion that the Second Amendment should be repealed. I like my guns and I consider any attempt by the government to seize them is the definition of a repressive government. Right. And they just say certain things like, well, we're not coming for your guns, but you kind of forfeited that because you did something that we don't like. And you're like, how is that a right at all? They can pass a statute to take away your right under the Constitution. And then just some person somewhere can just say, I think that this case meets the standard, right? Well, this person is dangerous or person's bad. And so we're going to go take their guns. It's not actually a right then. It's more like a recommendation that somebody can overrule, which is not what it is. G-Men, you're more likely to be violent on steroids than weed. Yeah, and I think they were digging into that. Like if there's a dangerousness component to it, people are very dangerous on alcohol. Very dangerous. You know how many domestic violence cases I represented that were based on alcohol? Almost all of them. You know how many came in on weed? Almost none of them. Alcohol agitate. I mean, people just get, speaking from first person perspective, like when I would drink, I'm pretty mellow, dude. But if I was going to like snap, man, if you're in the middle of alcohol, like an alcohol bender, it's like, that's the time it's going to happen. So yes, steroids, like the roid rage or other drugs. Like what happens if you're prescribed methamphetamines or the amphetamines? Like Adderall is amphetamine. Look at the label. It's speed. What happens if you are that and you take a couple of those? Now you're using it outside of the prescription and you're just jacked on amphetamines. Can they come take your gun away? Maybe. Maybe according to Pam Bondi, they could. NY says it boils down to this. A few of these rules and laws make sense, and the reality is they are arbitrary. They don't make sense. Well, you can reason your way across any natural right or any Bill of Right You can make strong arguments why free speech should be limited. I can make them all day. But the point is, we've already decided these matters. Like, that fails. There's more benefit from free speech than there is harm from free speech. We all acknowledge, yeah, speech can be harmful. Speech can be dangerous. There can be misinformation. You can hurt people's fifis. All sorts of bad things can happen. You can cause people to act, right? People might act on that speech and say, I'm outraged by this, and go do something bad. And we still have decided First Amendment free speech is better. The benefits from that outweigh all of the other benefits. Same thing with the Second Amendment. Same thing with the third and quartering in homes. And unreasonable, we've already delegated, like, it's been decided. So slowly trying to chip away at those and whittle those down is inappropriate. It's unconstitutional, but Bondi's DOJ is defending it. G-Men, since this law is clearly so ambiguous, why does the rule of lenity not kick in? And the rule of lenity is like you're deferring, let me look it up, but you're deferring to the defendant legal principle of statutory interpretation requiring courts to interpret ambiguous criminal statutes in favor of the defendant. I don't know if that came up today. And I think this guy is wanting it to be a rule rather than specifically applicable to him, which is why we might be here. Like, in other words, the Supreme Court, so he's already won, by the way. He already got his case dismissed at the district court. He already got his case dismissed at the Court of Appeals. So I think he's already victorious. And the Supreme Court, like, the appeal is brought by Pam Bondi. So she wants it to be a rule, like a more of a blanket rule, that she can use that statute to charge cases like this. So at the lower courts, I'm not sure if they defaulted to that. But I think there's all, I mean, yeah, if it's constitutionally ambiguous, you've also got issues like due process issues riddled with that. If you don't have proper notice of what the charges are, such that you can modify your behavior, then there's a due process problem because you're now committing crimes that you're not even aware of. Thank you for the question, G-Men. Schlista, Rob, Pam going to court and losing is actually better than not prosecuting it. That's how we ended up getting rid of bump stocks, sort of. Make them illegal via an illegal process and get the court to overturn it, thereby making it legal for everyone. Right, exactly. So Schlista, you're kind of explaining exactly where we were kicking off with G-Men. He's already won a couple times. I think Bondi is trying to win at the highest level so that she can continue to prosecute these cases. And I don't know what the basis is for the lower level dismissals, but the Supreme Court seemed like they were very skeptical of Pam's arguments. Rick D sent this from an airplane. Here are both videos of today's depots. So the Clinton files are out and the Hillary files are out. Man, interesting. I'm wondering if Iran is going to pop those off of the front page. King of Biltong. Hey, I'm still eating your biltong, sir. I need your address. Well, we hopefully are moving soon. We had a great call with a place that we really like. I said, send us the lease ASAP. ASAP. We'll sign it and we'll be out there. So as soon as I have a new address, King of Biltong, you'll be the first to get it so we get some delicious meats delivered to us. Thank you, King of Biltong. Hopefully you're enjoying all of my biltong, eating it. One old guy. Hey, 3 Allied aircraft were shot down by friendly fire. I think that's real, like the Kuwaitis, I think, shot down our aircraft. What the F? Getting foggy pretty quick. The mission of the U.S. military is to destroy or attrition the military to force the enemy into capitulation. The U.S. military has deviated from that. Have they? I don't know. I mean, we got Dadgum Burchett who says that no, there's no men in dress running anything anymore. And they're working hard to end the regime. There's like 49 of their highest leaders are all dead now. Khomeini's dead. So I don't know that it's not what you're saying. It feels like they're just pulling out all the stops. The goal is to end the regime. That's what's happening, as far as we can tell. One old guy. Islamic terrorism has been around since the 7th century. 21st century minds have a problem with world history. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe modern terrorism, maybe back in the 1970s. Yeah, good question. One old guy. I think you have a lot of different opinions on that. Hey, mom of many, what's going on? Hey, I don't promote my new business often on here, but I'm really excited about the guest speaker tonight in about an hour. On the Zoom meeting, retired Army colonel and medical director called Robert Walker. His heart and lungs were failing. Inflammation took over his body. Then a dear friend introduced him to the X39 stem cell reactivation technology. I've heard about those X39s, huh? So that's what you're doing, mom of many? Man, amazing. Okay, so check it out, friends, if you want to join and learn more about stem cell reactivation technology, courtesy of mom of many. Happening on Zoom tonight. There's the code. And hopefully you can share that in the chat and people can join up. So a medical doctor, retired Army colonel and medical doctor, Robert Walker. Man, I'm glad he's doing well. Thank you for that, mom of many. I've heard of those things. Do I have one of those? I think I might have one. I got like chronic back pain from an old wrestling injury that I deal with all the time. And I think I may have put one of those. Oh no, I think I got a signal relief patch. Yeah, my beautiful, amazing mother got me that. She said, here, try this, slap this on your back. I did. And you know, it's great, but I'm still in back pain. So thank you for that, mom of many. Hopefully it's a great stream and people learn lots about reactivating their stem cells. Stem cells are powerful. I have a good friend of mine who goes down to Mexico all the time and gets stem cells down there. And he raves about them. I don't know how old he is, probably like maybe late 60s. And he went down there and he told me about this process he did. He took some stem cell inhalation. And I'm not sold 100% on like taking stem cells because I've talked to two schools of thought on this. Some people say they're amazing. They're like a wonder, solves all your problems. The other people say they're going to turn into tumors if you take them. Like they're going to just latch on and just grow. Nobody knows what's going to happen 20 years from now. So, it's up for debate. This is not medical advice, but he went down there and he said he did like an 8-hour, I think it was 8 hours, like a nasal drip, slow drips of stem cells into this whole area, kind of just like drip down your throat, and then did inhalations and all sorts of stuff. And he came to my wedding and he's like, I can see everything. He's like, everything is so colorful. He says, I can smell again. I can smell everything. And I was like, he was like ecstatic. He's like telling everybody. I'm like, man, those are some good stem cells. They look pretty fun. One old guy, I'm a vet. I went in during the first Gulf War and came back in the second. I got out in 2011. Comment on the fog of war. The rest is how the military needs to destroy or attrit the enemy. Man, thank you for your service on that one, old guys. We shout out to all our vets out there. And yeah, man, war is hell. Like war is just hell. I think I've never been to war, never been in the military, but I've seen what it's done to a lot of people. And I had friends who came back. I had friends who came back and then died, coming back here because they just, kind of lost it. And it's horrific, man. It's horrific. So we try not to be like war cheerleaders. Of course, we support our president and a strong America. We don't have a lot of access to data or information. We're not privy to all the intricacies of these decisions. But I think one thing we can always agree on is shout out to our vets. Shout out to the men and women who serve. Shout out to the families, man, who've lost people and are losing people and probably will lose people. Our prayers are up for them and for you. Thank you, one old guy. All right, friends, those were great comments and great donos. Thank you for the detailed questions. Always fun. And it's good when I have to look things up. We appreciate that. We also had some comments over on locals. Let's see what's happening here. And we'll close it out on the day. We got Don. What's up, Don? Hey, please pray for not just our soldiers abroad, but also our brave soldiers stateside. My son's base is on high alert. Soldiers are being told to change out of military attire before leaving base. That's scary. Not be off base looking like a U.S. soldier. Sleeper cells are everywhere. I saw that. We talked about this morning, Don, too. We had 3 kind of weird attacks over the weekend. The one in Austin, two Americans dead because property of Allah was out. Then we had the Cincinnati shooting where I think 9 people were shot and one in critical condition. And then we had a weird stabbing on the I-495 out in D.C., where some maniac just starts stabbing people, killed a woman, killed a dog. So high alert out there. Thank you, Don. Shout out to your boy who is on the board. We saw that. Thank you, Don. Hey, Sergeant Bob, remember when Fetterman met with Trump at Mar-a-Lago? I think this positive meeting results in a lot of support from John. He is one voice of reason amongst the Dems. It's true. And he even put a suit on, Sergeant Bob, when he went to the State of the Union. You look good, John. Look good. Hey, what's going on? Amy Ann, their missiles went through a chemtrail. Probably. From Amy Ann. What's this? Londo. Baby Trump and baby Biden are reacting. Is that Khamenei? Little baby Khamenei is dead? Oh, gosh, Londo, thank you. Hey, what's going on over here? Tobo. There's a book called Tell Your Children. The author thought pot was harmless until he had a discussion with his wife, who's a forensic psychiatrist. She told him to review the scientific literature. He wrote the book. If you have a couple drinks, take some promethazine, and smoke pot, you could be very dangerous with a gun. Yeah, no, don't, I'm not, yeah, that's for sure. And there's like stories of youth who are smoking ultra high, whatever, potency, marijuana, going little nuts. I've seen studies on that. But I think it's also, a lot of other drugs. Like, remember when we had the people eating each other's faces off? Ambien, you ever taken Ambien? It's a wild drug too. Like hallucinate, start seeing things, bizarre. Think about how crazy politics has become, and consider that this has happened while pot became available widely and legally. Also, probably a part of the effort to just dumb down the entire society, get everybody addicted to drugs, get everybody addicted to porn, make sure everyone's gambling about everything, only watching sports, men acting like women, women acting like men, nobody's getting married, having babies, countries being invaded by foreigners who will do anything, including or murder you. Oh, Alex Berenson. Yeah, he was good on COVID. I didn't know he wrote a book about that. The truth about marijuana, mental illness, and violence. Interesting. Tell your children. Yeah, and it's everywhere. Like, I think they're selling like the Delta. There's some version, I think, that's like not actually THC, but it is. That I've seen them selling. I haven't seen them. I don't really go into gas stations, but I've heard that they sell them at gas stations and stuff. So like these kids are buying like these things that are not actually marijuana, but they have the same impact as marijuana. And those drugs are way worse, and they're filled with weird oils and all sorts of things. It's not good. Michael Swisher, big win from SCOTUS on New York redistricting. Hey, that dropped today. Man, shout out Michael Swisher. Okay, Malia Takis versus Williams. Man, we love a good Supreme Court opinion coming down. Thank you for that, Michael. We'll come back to that one. Sadie, taps are playing. One of your men returning home. Oh, gosh. Prayers up for that service person. Thank you, Sadie. Pause. Thank you, Sadie. We have a service man or woman coming home. And I don't think we've seen the names or the identities released, but we've got four dead Americans. And they're saying, get ready for more. All right. So thank you, Sadie. We appreciate that. Here's one from Rob G. Fan. Says, because I have two kids in high school, I decided a few years back that I would smoke pot because I'd heard how potent it is. I had smoked once in my life. When I was a teenager 40 years ago, I smoked one hit. I was so stoned and paranoid. It looked like caramels. It was some sort of hybrid. Let me tell you, it was worse than drinking a bottle of Patron. It's not what people in our 50s and 60s remember pot being. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like I think back in the 50s and 60s, there were still, when I was coming up, there wasn't pot that was accessible. And it was like, inherited, like we got it from like Mexico. It would come in from Mexico and then probably in somebody's butt or something like that. It was like the worst crap ever. Nobody even wanted to touch it because it was just, like it was just gross. And now it's like every store, totally decriminalized in many places. So what is happening? Especially to young kids, right? Especially to young kids, because their brains, it's like, I started with alcohol way too young, bad decision. But Like that was just alcohol, which is not good. But now there's all these other drugs, and now they're also prescribing drugs. Like how many kids are on amphetamines these days? What are the numbers of those? Well, what are the numbers on SSRIs? And how many people are on those? Huge, huge numbers. So it's like our country is just being highly medicated, either through illicit, illegal drugs or pseudo, illegal drugs, or just simple pharmaceuticals as well. Yeah, man, not good. John says, I like my immature mind, unadulterated, the better. And Rob G. Fan says, comparing Robitussin to pot sounds like a Ketanji argument. Oh, man, I mean, that's funny, Boopsy. That's funny. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's funny stuff. I mean, a lot of complexities out there. Hey, one old guy. Thank you for this big fat dono, one old guy, as we close out the day. Everyone has read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, especially Corporate America for Business, but it is a book of prosecuting war. Yeah. Knowing yourself, knowing your enemy are the most important ways to win the war. The woke mind doesn't want to offend people, but no one wants to know Islam as an enemy, from one old guy. And so I never went over to Iraq and served, but I had a bunch of friends who did. I was close. I went and interviewed, I did the meetings with the military folks, didn't go. I hated college. I'm like, this place sucks. Ended up, not signing up, but was close. And I had friends who went and came back. I actually had a friend I was at ASU with. We were sitting in the same classes. He said, I can't take this crap. And he exited, went to Iraq. I stayed around. But we sent emails and letters and we communicated a lot. Shout out to James. We have the same birthday too. James in the house. Awesome dude. And I learned a lot from him about it and about the conflict and about how they were not allowed to actually do their jobs. They went over there, according to him and other friends, and they were just kind of like on patrol. Just, it's like, and then getting killed, getting attacked constantly. So it's like, is that the mission? Is that what the military is for? To just kind of go like hang out in a war zone and get killed? And then you want to get dark. And the answer, according to some people, is yes, that is the goal. They want Americans over there to die so that we can say, see, we need more Americans over there. And like in prolong the conflict in a really dark way to think about it. But we try to operate from first principles. What is good for America? Let's save innocent lives. Okay. If like two countries want to kill each other, our military wants to kill their military, their military wants to kill our military or other militaries around. That's war. That's the nature of war. It's been one of the oldest traditions of humanity. It's not new. So we get that. But we want to preserve innocent lives. We don't want innocent people to be caught up in this and killed. And we certainly don't want our side to have deaths. We want to have such an overwhelming force that we can eliminate the threat and come home. And hopefully we're working on that. One old guy, thank you for the nice dono. Thank you for your service. Thanks for the big fat dono and the reference to Sun Tzu. Probably a good time to reread that again. All right, we got some comments on X. Let's say hello, see if we got any friends over here. Neuro D, yeah, check out the morning stream. Indeed, indeed. We got B Torn over here. So, oh, this is a nice, here's Founding Father Trump. Donald Trump will go down in American history as its most significant citizen in defining and solidifying the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This is from B Torn. A case on the War Powers Act being unconstitutional is likely when the lawsuits come over Iran. Trump can challenge this and end the political hypocrisy both sides that every time do. Remember this meme? Still getting the lawfarers straight and on track. Man, good comment on that, B Torn. So maybe they'll sue. You'll have some judge say, we want you to return those missiles back to the airplanes. Tibarama says the jubilant celebrations of the oppressed people of Venezuela and Iran demonstrate a well thought out and well executed campaign can actually have some good. Thank you, Tibarama, for that one. In the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela, goal is to dismantle tyrannical regimes. Very masterful from Tibarama. Thank you, Tibarama. Yellow states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. the right of the sober people to keep and bear arms with less than a 10-round capacity and no scary features. If the people in power like you, then shall not be infringed. Yeah, I don't think I read it that way last time we read it. Thank you for that. And be torn. Who loses geopolitically or economically? In Panama, over the canal, China. In Venezuela, China, Russia, Cuba. Who loses in Iran? China, Russia, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Palestinians. Monroe Doctrine is real, and it underlies every military action taken. Yeah, and I think if you start to, extrapolate out, well, what about China? What about Taiwan? What about the oil trade? What about the Strait of Hormuz and all these things? It's like, okay. So, there's a lot of depth to it and a lot that we just don't know. So we're going to learn a lot more about it, though. That is for sure. Yeah, boopsie. Thank you for that. All right, so friends, let's wrap it up here. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great week ahead. No doubt about it. There's going to be other amazing updates, election news, cases. Don Lemon got sued again. We've got midterms right around the corner. We're here for primaries. We got tomorrow. I think Texas has primaries. So things are about to get spicier than they already are. And we're looking forward to getting into it and going through it together with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Before we wrap it up, big thanks to our amazing mods and meme smiths. We got Donut Mind Me in the house. Big thank yous to John. We got K-Bean, Carrie B, Muffin Rando, Neuro D, Janek, Dog Digger, our friends Geegum Geegum, Elliot, Just Rhonda, all modding the fort down, keeping things nice and orderly. And of course, thank you for being here. Thank you for liking this video on your way out, wherever you're headed next. And thanks for subscribing if you haven't already done that, because we're here 5 days a week, baby. And we've got business to attend to save America. And we're grateful to be doing that together with you. So we'll pause here for the night. We're coming back tomorrow. In order to do this whole thing appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very, very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through